Sacred Symbols is sponsored by BetterHelp, an affordable, accessible, and effective form of therapy you can take advantage of right now at betterhelp.com/symbols. And for those of you out there who need a little coaxing to seek that help, I think BetterHelp checks all the boxes. High quality, accessible, easy to use, and much more affordable than in-person therapy too. My friends, it's time for you to discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/symbols today. That's betterhelp.com/SYMBOLS to get 10% off your first month of therapy sessions. That's betterhelp.com/symbols for high quality, affordable, and accessible online therapy that can help you right now. Sacred Symbols is sponsored by Chime. My friends, start making your financial dreams a reality with Chime. Signing up only takes 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Get started at chime.com/sacred. That's chime.com/SACRED. Again, that's chime.com/sacred for all of your basic banking needs. The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card is issued by Stride Bank NA pursuant to a license from Visa USA. Chime checking account and $200 qualifying direct deposit required to apply for the secure Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card. Based on a study conducted by Experian, Credit Builder members observed an average of 30-point FICO score 8 increases after 8 months with regular on-time payments. Results may vary. See chime.com for details. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply except at MoneyPass ATMs in a 7-Eleven or any Allpoint or Visa Plus Alliance ATM. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 247. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my son, Chris Raygun. Chris, who is that? That's a SpongeBob character on your shirt. It's I'm trying to learn everything about SpongeBob, but I know what's his name.
It's Patrick. It's Patrick.
Right. Patrick.
Yeah,
right. Star is what I was going to say. Patrick Star. Okay.
Yeah. I love how menacing. It's like one of my favorite frames of SpongeBob ever. And I saw it on a T-shirt. I was like, I gotta get this. I want to wear it to a wedding.
You should wear it to my wedding, please.
Yeah.
Mm. My exposure to SpongeBob is all online memes, basically.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know how I missed it. Like, I think it started when I was late in high school, and then I was actually mystified that it was still going, isn't it? Like, but they jump in and out, right? And
yeah, it is still going.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know anything about that, but I like your shirt. Welcome to the show, my friend. Good to see you. Mm-hmm. And Dustin Furman, executive producer. I also like your shirt.
Thank you.
How are you doing today, my friend?
I could be better because we have run out of coffee in the Furman house. We have new coffee coming in the mail, but I was told via an email that it'd be arriving today. Mail comes, no package. So
that's the worst.
I'm a little upset by that, but I will survive. But I have some silver lining, guys. I just recently, I picked up some new bad boys. I'm going to show you the video here. See these?
Oh my God. What is it? Yeah.
They're Aldi branded joggers.
Nice.
Dude,
you look like you're wearing, I mean, this is going to be way over your head, but if you look up the old San Diego Padre jerseys, that is basically them.
Yeah.
What you're wearing.
Oh,
so yeah.
It looks like
I'm telling you, like, look it up.
You know, it looks like LJN merch.
Oh, dude,
LJN?
I know.
Yeah, the rainbow logo.
Yeah.
Absolutely, very well done.
For some reason, Aldi, they made a big deal about what they're calling the 2023 collection of their own merchandise. And Holly and I went out. I was like, we love this. We have an irrational love of this store. It's only right that we buy some of this merchandise. And let me tell you, these joggers for $10. They're no Mack Weldons, of course, but they're not bad. They're not bad.
Good for you. $10 pants, supermarket pants.
Hell yeah.
Good for you, my friend. By the way, there was a recipe here in the printer that Micah must have printed out. Everyday pancakes from New York Times Cooking. The basic pancake is made from a simple batter of eggs, flour, milk, and baking powder for leavening. Is it leavening? It's leavening.
I feel like it's leaven, but I'm not sure.
You can use different types of flour if you want to experiment with whole wheat or buckwheat.
You guys print out? Like, you guys print stuff like that out?
Yeah. She has like a little book of her. Because she cooks and bakes all the time.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
It is much easier if you print it.
I love printing things out. I'm printing things out left and right, but it's a lot of money on the ink. But you know, I said this on the Constellation. I didn't. I was not able to reiterate it. I got my power bill, another $0 power bill because of those solar panels.
Doesn't help you with the ink though. So I guess
No.
you now have money for ink.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Okay.
Exactly. Now
Yeah.
I'm
you
not
have to
destroying the earth with carbon emissions. I'm now ruining trees.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Very
on
good.
that note, we begin the episode of Sacred Symbols. What is this? 247th episode. We appreciate all of you out there being with us. Welcome. We go up each and every week, and you can get us 3 days early and ad-free. 3 days early and ad-free on Patreon. Patreon.com/laststandmedia. You can find merch at laststandmedia.store, including free shipping in the United States on all stickers. Mike is doing a great job with that. We got sweatshirts, we got hats, we got t-shirts, and so on and so forth, all shipped from my home. My home. We have a little Harry Potter style closet off of our kitchen with all the merch in it. We have some stuff in the garage. We have some stuff in the dining room. Micah brings it into our little office bedroom thing we have here, and she gets it going. And she's shipping out things like this. Like this. In fact, someone wrote in last week asking, could you sign a poster for me? And I was like, yeah, all right. And then I checked in and it had already been shipped. Too late. Too late to sign this poster. But thank you so much for your, and I don't know if anyone can hear it. I can hear it, but Treble's barking in the background.
It's
okay.
okay.
No one hears it, so it's good. I hear it.
He's excited. He's excited about Resident Evil coming out soon.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I heard actually, I was just reading on when I was walking the dogs on my phone that if you have an we're recording this the day before Resident Evil 4 comes out, so this will come out the day Resident Evil 4 comes out. It won't even be relevant. But apparently, if on Xbox you can change your setting to New Zealand right now and play the game, if you're in the US or somewhere else.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
you shouldn't have told me that.
So if you choose to buy it on Xbox, you can do. I mean, it'll be irrelevant by the time anyone hears this as well.
Yeah.
Anything else to say about this? Yeah, patreon.com/laststandmedia. As I already said, Discord connection. So many thousands of you over there, 6,000 something, I think. At this point, we really appreciate you. Have fun over there. Of course, we have a Clips channel. Leave us nice reviews on podcast services. Thumb us up on YouTube. Hit that. Smash that like button over
Colin,
here. Yeah.
I should have wrote in here. I forgot to say it's somewhat. Well, I guess it's still important because it's available, but the live show is available today on our Patreon for $5 subscribers. And so if you want to check that out, it's at the $5 tier. We appreciate you guys supporting us. I talked about it a lot last week, so I won't regurgitate all of that. There's info on the Patreon. There's a public post if you want to know more. And then there will be the new post with the video and with all the details on our Discord watch party. Very excited to have it out. And if you aren't there for the watch party, that's okay. You can just join up and watch whenever you like. And we appreciate that.
Some people are making fun of the way you say watch.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Thanks for bringing it up.
You're welcome. Just wanted to say that.
I'm trying. I said watch
fine.
Very specifically, actually, during that.
Yeah. You called in the right vowel.
Are you excited about the live show, Colin? Though I feel like you jump straight to the watch thing here.
Oh yeah, the live show. Yeah, no, I am excited about the live show. I want everyone to see it. I know everyone's eager about it. I think people did a fairly decent job of not spoiling it for each other, which is good. And so yeah, I think that'll be a lot of fun. And I appreciate all of our patrons over there that are gonna watch. Yeah, the watch party is gonna be fun, and I want to see what people think of watch party. I want to see what people think of Dagan's stand-up. I want to see what people think of our choices for games and all the conversation and comedy that happens. It was a lot of fun. Thank you everyone out there again for coming out and supporting us. And actually, Elliot Hillis wrote into us. I wanted to read this at the top. He said, "Hi, Colin." And remember, you can write in. One of your perks is writing it on Patreon. On the news feed, there is a thread that goes live each week. I delete it quickly, so be on your game. He says, "Hi, Colin. I hope this message finds you well. I was wondering if you could shed some light on the mission statement of Last Stand Media. Is your primary objective solely to create enjoyable and engaging content for your niche audience, or do you have a broader goal in mind? As a listener of your platform, I appreciate the fact that it provides a space for alternative perspectives in an industry that tends to be dominated by a particular political ideology. For me, as a 40-year-old Christian father of 2, Last Stand Media is a place where I can both listen to and engage with others regardless of their beliefs and feel completely comfortable. I'm curious to know if this was a deliberate decision on your part to intentionally go against the norm and stand for something bigger, or if it happened more organically. Thank you all for your hard work that you and your team put into creating such great content each week. I always look forward to tuning in." Thank you, Elliot, for writing in. And, the live show really brought this to the fore for me because I think that we're not trying, or at least I'm not trying intentionally to do much of anything, I really do think that we, that a pretty decent group of people gravitate towards us, like disaffected people in some way, like not only politically, but just socially and others, just people that are just tired of the same old thing. And I think that brings like open minds, eagerness for something different, and kind of a more welcoming posture towards people. Because I don't consider this a conservative or liberal show. I don't consider this a religious show or anything like that, but all are welcome. And so I'm glad that that is shining through. And thank you, Elliot, for writing in and for your kind words. I think I think it's working because it's real. I mean, that's my opinion. Without having to work with PR, without having to say the same thing. I mean, everyone says the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
They all agree with each other. It makes it somewhat easy to do a competitive show because all you have to do is say something different. I find it weird that all the shows agree with each other and that everyone that does all these shows are friends with each other and they're all friends with the industry and stuff. It's very strange. So that incestuous shit is not welcome here. And I'm glad that that shines through. Christian or not, male, female, whatever, gay, straight, especially gay. You're very welcome here. Well, Sacred Symbols Plus is another perk we get over on Patreon. That's our twice weekly supplement to this show. So there's 3 episodes of Sacred Symbols a week if you're over on Patreon. Did a recent episode with Tom from Moore's Law is Dead about PlayStation 5 Pro, PlayStation 5 Slim, PlayStation 6. Very interesting insights into what could be, timelines, how powerful these machines could be, et cetera, and so on. We did a 2-part episode on Hogwarts Legacy. One episode is a spoiler cast and review discussion with Carolyn, previously of Limited Run Games, although I think she might have announced today where she's working next, or she will be soon, because she got another job in the industry, which I was very pleased to hear. And the other episode that we did was me and Noam Bloom, a political commentator, to talk about the political ramifications of J.K. Rowling and Hogwarts Legacy. So we did that. Somewhat of a controversial episode, actually, which is fine. People were disappointed that I couldn't get the other side on the podcast, but I tried. And I actually was a little bit put off by people saying, like, I was like, I'm looking for a trans person to talk about this. And people were like, well, why does the person have to be trans? And I'm like, so when I talked about black issues in the industry, I should have just gotten anyone I could find. Is that what you're saying? It's interesting. I disagree. So I tried to find a trans person. None of them wanted to be on the show or had weird caveats. So I said no. And some people were upset about that, but I did the best I could to provide the necessary balance. And people were, I think, confused about one thing that I wanted to say, and then we can move on, is that people are like, well, you're not very open-minded on some of these ideas that you talk about on the show. And I'm like, I think you're confusing the fact of open-mindedness with welcoming people to say what they want on the show. These are two different things. Just because I was going to have someone on the show to give their side of all of the Hogwarts thing didn't mean I was going to agree with it. What it meant is that I'm so unafraid of what they say and think what these people are going to say is not as compelling as what I have to say about these issues, that I'm willing to literally let them say it so you can make that decision for yourself. It doesn't mean that I'm going to lean into it and be like, oh yeah, of course you're right. And I think some people got that confused, and I don't know why, because I thought it was fairly obvious what I was trying to do. But just because I'm going to let people on to say things that I don't agree with or don't like, doesn't mean that they're going to change my mind or that I need to go into these conversations open-minded. There are certain things you're never going to change my mind about. But what's important to me is to provide or try to provide some sort of balance so you can see what you think for yourself. You might disagree with me. That's called confidence. So thanks for your support. We appreciate you. Other episodes of Sacred Symbols Plus include 9 episodes of The Last of Us on HBO, Sacred Symbols Cross-Defining Duke, Sacred Saga, we finally got back to, and so on and so forth. All right, my friends, let's get into some various topics of discussion as we stretch our legs. I want to start with something a little sad. Stephen King wrote into us all the way from Bangor, Maine. He says, hello, gentlemen. Early last week, I lost my grandmother to cancer at the age of 82. Though it fills me with sadness that she's no longer here with us, I wanted to celebrate her life and the direct impact she had on me in video games. I was blessed to have a grandmother who played video games since I was a primary schooler or younger. I'm 38 now, which is rare for someone of her generation, and is something that I never took for granted. It was at her house that I got to experience some of my favorite games of all time on SNES. My household upgraded, in quotes, from the NES to Genesis. Oof. Such as Link to the Past, Super Mario World, Mega Man X, etc. She played Mega Man X. That's hysterical. But the moment I want to share the most is one that has remained legendary for my younger brother and me since the early 90s. When we watched in awe as Grandma played through the entirety of Life Force on NES without using the Konami code or even using a continue, something I would struggle to get through even with a Game Genie. I love you, Grandma. Thank you for everything, and I'll see you one day on the other side. That's a really touching story. I love to hear it. I love that the story is about Life Force, because that was a game that Dagan and I were obsessed with when we were kids too. It's a Konami game. People might know it as Salamander, depending on where you live in the world. And that is a hard as balls shooter. So it's hysterical that she, like, that game is hard as fuck. Notoriously. So I love that. I love that memory. I'm very sorry to hear about your grandma, but it's so cool that you guys have those memories. Did you guys have my grandparents? Definitely, all my grandparents have been dead for a long time, but I don't think they even knew what a video game was, to be perfectly honest. I don't know. Yours must be, what's going on with your grandparents, Dustin? They must be young, right? Comparably?
Younger. Yeah. I think my one grandfather is either 69 or maybe 70. Oh,
she's younger than my mom.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, my mom's 72.
Yeah, I had a great grandma for a decent portion of my life, actually, which was kind of interesting. But none of my grandparents really gamed while I was alive. I have some nice stories that my mom has told me about my one grandpa being obsessed with Legend of Zelda on NES to the point that he would go and create, like he would tape paper together and make maps of the layout so he could try to figure it out. And he was upset. He's a huge into tech still to this day, but so he's kind of lost the edge on gaming. But there was a time where he was really invested. So he appreciates it when I tell him about different things. He always is interested, but it's not necessarily quite his thing. But I love to think about Grandpa with the map for Legend of Zelda.
Definitely, dude. A lot of people were getting into Zelda. It's funny to talk about some older folks about Zelda. That was a seminal game for some folks. The same thing with my Uncle John, who's in his 60s, so it's not quite as old, but he would always talk about how he would call the Nintendo helpline. Like the actual like number in the booklet.
That's insane.
And so that game like did something to people. They had never really seen or understood anything like that before, which was pretty cool. How about you, Chris? How old are you? Are your grandparents still around?
I have some. So I have a grandmother on my dad's side. I have my great grandfather's still alive. Actually, he's in Puerto Rico, living it up.
Oh,
but
Puerto Rico.
But I don't know, man. Like most of my grandmother, all of my grandparents are basically like they're basically immigrants. Basically, like they don't really speak English. They don't. Like my grandmother spoke Spanglish for a long time before she passed, so like it was like barely like there was no way that I was going to explain to her what Budokai was, you know. But but it's I didn't really have a lot of family who were into video games. I think my parents weren't really into it. They tried, like, which was nice of them, but like they couldn't get it. I remember my mom really struggling, and my dad being like, I don't get this shit. I'm too old for this shit. My parents are also like older. Because I'm like the second kid of a second marriage. So my dad's, I think, about as old as your mom, Colin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my mom is younger than, my mom was like in her 60s. But it's, I think it was like my sister, who is who passed a long time ago, was the one who really like kind of grandfathered me into it because she had a PlayStation. She had like an NES and she had all this stuff and I was too young to really understand any of that. So I was just kind of thrown into it kind of right away. But as far as like the older people in my family, no way. Like there was no way they understood any of that.
Love the idea of grandma playing Mega Man X. I mean, that's badass. Did she know to pick Chill Penguin first? I wonder if she figured it out by herself. She used Nintendo Power. She might have raw dogged it for all I know and not even gotten any of the enemy skills and just fucking did it straight up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, my grandmother would watch Price is Right, and that's about it.
I mean, that's phenomenal stuff. You know, there's nothing wrong with that either. All right. Stephen King, thank you for writing, and I'm sorry to hear about your grandma. Good story. Memorialized forever here on Sacred Symbols.
Yes.
All right. Jonathan Rumor wrote in. Rumor, I don't know. Says, hey, Sacred Gamists. Hope you're all well. Just wanted to spin a small transcontinental yarn. Over the last week, I've been chronicling my journey from New Jersey to Kansas on the LSM Discord, which is available to all patrons on the $5 tier and up. And I passed through Western PA as I passed through the Western Pennsylvania exclusion zone. I had thought, why don't I, an intrepid and autistic traveler, go to the Last Stand Mecca, Deli on the Circle in Litchfield, Ohio? I had one of the warmest welcomes in my life, and that was before I mentioned I was a fan. The Sacred Sandwich was absolutely worth the money. I posted my very own IGN style review on Google if anyone cares. Sorry for being long-winded, but to anyone in the area, give them some love. Thanks, guys. Right on. It is like a sort of Mecca situation. This is what I was saying. This is Hitler's bunker, right? but we're not Nazis, right? So
right.
Well, we
Right,
have to figure and are they going to destroy this deli one day to make sure that no one can worship us when we're gone? Can't have anywhere for people to congregate. I don't know.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have destroyed Hitler's bunker. Yeah. That's a monument. Like, that's interesting. You know?
I feel like maybe emotions were a little high.
Yeah.
Maybe that, they weren't exactly thinking about the long term
about making it a museum or something. Yeah.
They were just they were probably just thinking, there's a demon here. Let's destroy it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right.
That's fair enough. Yeah. All right. Well, shout out, Jonathan. Glad you had a good trip. Deli on the Circle, Litchfield, Ohio. Get the Sacred Sandwich. Boar's Head Meat. Shout out to them.
Yeah.
Mr. Moham wrote in, I was curious about what you thought of this, Chris. He says, I was feeding my insatiable daily gambling addiction on my betting website of choice when, to my surprise, I saw that listed among the expected NBA games in the NFL future bets was the ability to wager actual money on our very own Chris Raygun for his upcoming boxing match. My question for Chris, how much do I need to line your pockets with you to throw this fight? Presuppose word will never get out and your integrity will never be questioned. It's interesting, Chris. People could be betting real money on you. This is good shit. Love it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's not something that I had considered when I started all this, because now it stresses me out. Like the idea that people are putting like money on this. Like I don't like that at all. But if do what you got to do. Do what you want to do. Like ultimately at the end of the day, I don't give a shit. Like do whatever you want. But I'm not throwing the fight because like personally, like I know this is like kind of like a joke question, but it's not a matter of like whether or not it would get out that I threw a fight. It's that I would know, and that would bother me like forever.
Right.
So like, no, I'm not going to throw the fight. I'm going to do what I can. I might lose. I might win. Who the fuck knows? But there's no foul play.
You better go down to the third round or I don't know what I'll do. Let's see. Mr. Moham, by the way, take it easy. I was feeding my insatiable daily gambling addictions. Very good writing. But makes me a little bit worried about you as well. So
yeah, relax.
Just take it easy out there. I gamble. I like gambling actually, but I just don't. I just don't. With all the legalized gambling, it's just I can't. You can gamble on anything, dude. Anything. Yeah. It's so funny. You can gamble on everything, and on these websites. Not only in the sports, like I'm like the coin flips and all that kind of shit. You can do all that, but just literal events. Who wins movie awards? It's crazy. Yeah.
It's
awesome.
It's an insane environment. What's that? Jeff Goldblum, Life Finds a Way.
Yeah. It certainly does.
How do we get Sales Saga on there? You can bet on one of the three of us.
Right.
Maybe on a monthly basis, and then of course the year basis as well for the big prize.
Right. That's very meta. Because they're betting on us and we're kind of betting. So it's a level deep.
Mm-hmm.
Sacred Symbols is sponsored by BetterHelp, an affordable, accessible, and effective form of therapy you can take advantage of right now at betterhelp.com/symbols. It's important for everyone to hear this every once in a while, and so I'll come right out and say it. You are your own life's VIP. What I mean by this is, if you're not okay, if you're not taken care of, if you're not feeling your best, then you can't possibly be of use to anyone, even yourself. So you've got to treat yourself with great care, monitor your heart and mind, and when it comes time, seek the help you need from the outside. And I say when the time comes because it will. See, whether you're anxious or feeling sad, having issues at work or home, in friendships or relationships, really whatever you can think of, understand that each and every one of us goes through similar, relatable trials and tribulations. You're not alone. And my friends at BetterHelp can help you overcome what ails you in your life with good, old-fashioned therapy. Maybe I shouldn't say old-fashioned though, because in reality, BetterHelp is about as modern as it gets. Instead of having to go to an office to see a mental health professional, you can instead use BetterHelp to connect to a licensed therapist that can help with what ails you, and you can even speak to them via video or audio or even just by text. In a world where convenience is everything, there's no reason why something as vital and important as therapy couldn't fit into your world just a little bit better. BetterHelp goes above and beyond to go to you, which if you ask me is half the battle when it comes to opening folks' minds to mental health care. The truth is that therapy hasn't only been useful in my life in the past, it's useful right now. As in, I use therapy to navigate my life in the present. And for those of you out there who need a little coaxing to seek that help, I think BetterHelp checks all the boxes. High quality, accessible, easy to use, and much more affordable than in-person therapy too. And if you don't connect with your therapist, you can always change to another one at no additional cost, because again, it's about you. This whole thing, you, your own life's VIP. My friends, it's time for you to discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/symbols today. That's BETTERHELP.com/SYMBOLS to get 10% off your first month of therapy sessions. That's BetterHelp.com/symbols for high quality, affordable, and accessible online therapy that can help you right now. Sacred Symbols is sponsored by Chime, the award-winning banking app and suite of basic banking features that you can take advantage of right this very second at chime.com/sacred. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Money matters. It matters a lot, actually. And so you need to treat your own money and your own financial situation with great care. With Chime, you can get down to the basics of banking, gain access to vital services that every adult should have, like a checking account, for instance, and you can even utilize their Credit Builder Visa credit card to make your purchases, which, if done responsibly, can net you a higher credit score. So what do I mean by responsibly? It's easy. It's how I've been using credit for years, actually. I buy items with credit and immediately pay the bill. It's that simple. This has helped make my credit score go above 800, which, for those of you that are unaware, is about as good as it gets. Using credit responsibly is all about not overextending yourself and only spending what you can pay back. And the more you use credit responsibly by paying your bills on time, the more likely your credit score is to go up. And with a higher credit score comes better access to and lower interest rates for cars, homes, and other types of loans, more favorable terms on apartment and car leases, and so much more. Hell, you may miss out on a job for having a bad credit score because lots of employers will use it as a barometer to see just how responsible and careful you are. So if you're buying groceries, gas, or paying some bills, consider the Credit Builder Visa credit card at Chime, where members see an increase of 30 points to their credit scores on average, and they do this with no annual fees or large security deposits. You don't even need a credit check of your own to apply. My friends, start making your financial dreams a reality with Chime. Signing up only takes 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Get started at chime.com/sacred. That's chime.com/SACRED. Again, that's chime.com/sacred for all of your basic banking needs. The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card is issued by Stride Bank N.A. pursuant to a license from Visa USA. Chime checking account and $200 qualifying direct deposit required to apply for the secure Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card. Based on a study conducted by Experian, Credit Builder members observed an average of 30-point FICO Score 8 increases after 8 months, with regular on-time payments. Results may vary. See chime.com for details. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal fees may apply except at MoneyPass ATMs in a 7-Eleven or any Allpoint or Visa Plus Alliance ATM.
All right, let's get to some of the news items here. We have to start here. Papa Fridge wrote in, said, "Hey boys, somber write-in, but wanted to give a shout out to Lance Reddick, who was taken too early from us. Many people will remember him from Oz, The Wire, or my beloved Fringe, but he was also a lead role in both Horizon 1 and 2, and most importantly was Zavala, I think that's how you say it, in Zavala, in Destiny since it launched in 2014. Thank you. Seeing Destiny fans flock to the Titan Vanguard this past weekend to celebrate him really hit, and Reddick will be sorely missed not only in future Destiny content, but from the media generally. Here's to you, Lance. Hold your loved ones close, and remember, as always, eyes up, Guardian." Chris, I want to start with you. What do you think about the passing of Lance Reddick? Very unexpected. He is young.
Yeah.
And it's a shame to see it. And I think I had spoken to you privately or separate. I don't know where we said this. Maybe it was on Plus, but I thought it was really cool and very telling that he was apparently playing Destiny the night before he died.
Yeah.
And I did see the videos of people gathering in game this is kind of the cool stuff. Also, I mean, it's a little weird too to people on the outside, but it's some of the cool stuff that games can do where like you can celebrate someone like this in other mediums. And
right.
I think that's kind of, not everyone, someone dies and not everyone just like starts watching Netflix or something like that. I just think it's pretty interesting. So I was curious to get your thoughts here.
Yeah, no, it's super sad. It's one of those things that it really, this kind of came out of nowhere, and it didn't hit me how much I liked and admired Lance Reddick until he passed. Like, because I didn't really think about like how often I had heard his voice throughout the years just playing this game. And, in retrospect, it's pretty obvious. Like we would quote, like me and my friends would quote him all the time. He's got that irreplaceable cadence and voice. I don't know how the games that kind of hinge around him are going to handle it, because he is an irreplaceable kind of cadence. And, he was there at Destiny from day one. Like you said, he was actually like a fan of it. Like he consistently played, like he would post videos of him just like playing Destiny, like on his off time, which is awesome. And obviously he's great in John Wick and all these other movies. And if you guys have never checked out his comedy content, any of the stuff that he did as like just as a joke, it's some of the funniest shit I've ever seen. Like him as the Toys R Us manager for Funny or Die, or there's one where he's like he plays a detective and he's kind of like uncovering secret IHOPs. I can't remember what the hell it was, but he plays it so serious and so straight. It's awesome. So yeah, it's super sad that he's gone. 60 is way too young for something like this. We should have had a lot more time with him, but alas, here's how it goes. It's really sad. It was really cool to see everybody gathering.
Yeah,
like in game, like that was like really. It's weird because it was sad news, but it was also like kind of like, oh, that's really like sweet. And like you said, like you can't really have this in other mediums in the same way.
No, I remember when I think it was Tom Petty died because he passed away at the hospital right near me in Santa Monica, and so I walked down there and there was just a bunch of people congregating with like doing like kind of commemorating him, and that's about as. That's pretty common, I think, and that's about as much as you can do. That to have some sort of second level of doing it that can really attract people from all around the world, I think is pretty cool. And he'll always be memorable for me from The Wire because he plays Cedric in The Wire. I mean, The Wire is an awesome show if people haven't. And he was in Oz, which I also love, but he came kind of later and he wasn't in it very much. But I also wanted to note he plays Silence in Horizon as well. And so the statements from the two companies that I think would be most relevant to us are Bungie and Guerrilla. So Bungie said, Lance Reddick was an iconic presence on screen in Destiny and most importantly in person. His love for our community shined through in Commander Zavala and his uncompromising dedication to his craft and out of the radiating kindness that touched those around him. To say he will be missed is a profound understatement, yet no less true. Rest in peace, Lance. And then Guerrilla said, thank you, Lance Reddick, for everything you've brought to the character of Silence, for sharing your infinite talent and wisdom with us, for your generous warmth and inimitable presence, and for your profound impact, not just as part of our cast, but on our community. We were deeply honored to work with you. You will be missed. We extend our most heartfelt condolences to his loved ones. I don't want to spoil either Destiny 2 or Horizon Forbidden West, but I will say, and Dustin, we can go over to you, I am curious what they're going to do about this from that perspective. It starts getting kind of dark because I'm sure, first of all, there's probably plenty of B-roll or B audio that they have with his that they can cobble together. But I bet you can program AI pretty easily to do these voices. And now I think it's a matter of if you can get permission from estates to do that or whatever, or if you just let these characters go. I think we're going to kind of confront those problems soon. But I'm wondering what you think of this. Yeah,
it will be interesting to see how they handle it. I mean, we see other times where a lot of times characters are just kind of like the characters are killed off screen or they aren't involved anymore. We see things like that. So I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on the whole like AI to replace. Like for me, like I could maybe see a situation that if it was understood before this person died that they agreed, like if I'm not here, finish out this role. But it's one of those things we don't need to be post-death animating people until the end of time. That just feels bad. But crazy timing for him to die. And like you said, way too early, just because this weekend, John Wick 4 coming out as well, that he has a pretty significant role in. And so it's just, he's one of those actors for me, I think I'm like Chris, where you don't think about him all the time, but when you do, you're like, oh yeah, he's freaking awesome. Like all the stuff he's in, he's really great. And so this weekend, I'm going to see John Wick Chapter 4 and I'll be like, damn, like he probably is awesome in that movie. And it just sucks that he's no longer with us. So also the stuff in Destiny 2 was super heartwarming. I'd love to see stuff like that. I think it's super cool that we have this way in this type of a game to do something like this. It's very futuristic, but it doesn't feel bad. It feels good to see people go and lay that kind of respect for him.
Definitely. I will say I don't, I haven't read anything about this further, but on Wikipedia it says Reddick died from natural causes at age 60. You don't die from natural causes at age 60. So I'd be interested to know if we'll ever figure out what might have gone on there, because you don't die at 60 for no reason. And that's sad. It's sad. It obviously was a surprise and snuck up on him. And who knows what it could be. So very, very sad, but we might not ever know. All right. And by the way, I'm not trying to say it's a conspiracy. I'm just saying we don't know. Just a comment down, everyone.
Yeah, they're probably just keeping it private, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, you don't die of natural causes at 60 years old. So R.I.P. Lance Reddick. You will be missed. I loved the character Silence. I thought that was a really compelling character in Horizon. As far as what they're going to do there, I do not know. I mean, it's interesting because he's not really the antagonist he's kind of this gray character that exists parallel to the bad guys.
Yeah.
And that's not a spoiler because that's true in the first one too. And so you kind of are, I was hoping we were going to feel that out more, you know, and I don't think that's going to be possible. And I'm sure it's going to be neat. Either that stuff that you can imagine Horizon 3's mocap might be, I don't say it's done, but maybe they did some of that. Maybe they did some of the voice acting, but I doubt it.
Yeah. I think Horizon's going to have an easier time than Destiny because I think the nature of Destiny being a live service and there being like seasonal story content, like basically every week. I don't know how in advance that's done, really. Like I could imagine a scenario, and I'm totally speaking just from pure speculation here, but I can imagine that Destiny 2's VO and that stuff isn't quite on the same level of like a South Park turnaround, but I would imagine it's closer than, you know, standard game releases where like I don't think they record these things 3 years in advance, but you know, I don't know. They're going to have time to figure out how to write him out of the next Horizon. You know, they have ample time to do that. But Destiny's got to like flip on a dime kind of because they've got a seasonal story to maintain. So like I'm curious how they're going to do it, but
yeah, it'll be an interesting challenge for writers and yeah, I at least in animation, if you're doing cutscene animation and stuff like that, VO is done very early.
Yeah.
So you would assume, or at least there would be some sort of like someone doing the VO, but I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out soon enough. RIP, Lance Reddick, be well. Okay. What's the next piece of news here? Oh, I wanted to note this. This was from our friends at Video Games Chronicle. It says Bella Ramsey expects The Last of Us Season 2 to air in late 2024 or early 2025. She was on ITV in the UK, the Jonathan Ross show, and this was transcribed by Video Games Chronicle. It says, quote, "It will be a while," when she was asked about Season 2. "I think we'll probably shoot at the end of this year, beginning of next, and then it's like a year of filming, so it'll be probably the end of 2024 or early 2025. So no Season 2 for quite some time." Dustin, tell me about your feelings.
That sounds about right. It's weird because for TV, we have this expectation almost that once a year we get this new season, as been in the past with a lot of shows. But with HBO quality levels, they need time to write. When you have this caliber of actors involved, they also need to line up their schedule. I'm sure that Pedro Pascal is very high in demand, so there's probably some workings around with that. And just all the effects, I'm sure they want to do this next season bigger and better than the last, now that they've really proven how popular it is. So it's unfortunate to kind of wait this long in between, but I also totally understand.
How are you feeling about this, Chris? What are you thinking?
I think, I feel like everything Dustin said makes perfect sense. These are really like big actors that are in really, really high demand. Also, just the quality bar for HBO is pretty intense. This isn't Friends. You know, like they can't just get people together on some random set and film for a little bit and then just be gone for a year and come back with a reasonable enough script. And also I just think there's a lot riding on it now because I think everybody involved is keenly aware that The Last of Us 2 is controversial. And I think everybody involved is keenly aware that they want to handle it in a way that's respectful, but also I would imagine in a way that isn't as volatile. I would bet that a lot of time and effort is going into kind of restructuring Season 2 in such a way that it makes sense and isn't quite as jarring as it was for the second game. And I would imagine that a lot of it is just, I would imagine a lot of effort's going into making sure that the second season is stretched out a lot further. Like, I don't think we're going to get just 2 seasons of The Last of Us, you know? Like,
I think they've already said that.
I think they already said, like, we're going to get at least 4, probably, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would think, my theory here is that I think they've said, 2 confirmed, they've talked openly about a 3rd, so that must be in the working. And then I think you could imagine a situation where The Last of Us Part 3 comes out and the game and the series this would be very risky, you know, to do that quickly, though. You would have double the opportunity to spoil what's going on two different ways to represent things. I just don't know how they're going to do all this, but I do think we all agree that they need to rework the chronology of the first one and the order that they tell the story for obvious reasons. And I won't spoil any more than that. And then stretch it out into 2 episodes because it's 30 hours long. The game is fucking huge.
Yeah.
And it's just too dense. There's too many people in it. So
it would be interesting synergistically if they were like, hey, you know, let's say you get like 4 seasons of The Last of Us and the series finale is the, you know, the end of The Last of Us Part 2, and that leads kind of into the release of Last of Us 3. So it's like, hey, if you want more of this, if you want a continuation of this, here it is in the game, and it's right there. Or at least it's like very, very close. I would imagine that's at least a pitch that went on, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it followed through.
That'd be pretty sweet. I mean, I want The Last of Us Part 3. So, you know, I'm hoping,
well, you'll get
hoping against hope. Yeah, I think so. All right. By the way, do you guys I don't know much about actors or actresses, so no one really comes to mind for me, but do you guys know who you might want to see play Abby?
Danny DeVito.
Oh,
No, I don't know.
So anyway, I started shooting.
Yeah. So anyways, I started blasting. I don't know. I honestly, I haven't really been paying much attention at all to Holly. I just caught Everything Everywhere All at Once. And it's a movie that people have been screaming at me to see, and it is actually amazing. But I don't know. No actor or actress comes to mind. I feel like they could just use the person.
By the way, I would have never casted either of these people as the characters they were cast at, and they work very well in terms of Joel and Ellie. So they'll find someone. I mean, think you got to find someone that's going to have a thick skin. If they're going to kind of bear the brunt.
Honestly, they probably could just cast whoever did it.
It was Laura Bailey, but she was already in the 9th episode as one of the nurses.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Laura Bailey would have been very interesting. She's not big enough, though. You know,
whatever. So that's just so silly.
Put Laura Bailey in a fat suit.
Whoa. Donut Drake.
Donut Drake, right?
Yeah, Donut Abby.
I mean, you know who I was. It's going to be. I mean, she's way too old now, but it's got to be someone like Michelle Rodriguez, right? Like someone like
I know
that.
what you mean.
Like a very clearly female, kind of sexy, right? Like Michelle Rodriguez is like kind of sexy, but you're really more in tune with her masculinity in some way, you know? Like, in my opinion, like I think about her on Lost, for instance. And she's like kind of sexy and kind of, you know, like sexualized, but she's
kind of small though, isn't she?
I don't know. She's in Lost. She's pretty muscular, and in her various, she's got big arms.
Yeah, I don't know. I really,
that's who comes to mind for me. I mean, she's too old though, but someone like that. But it'll probably be someone.
What if they just made her CG the whole time,
dude.
And it was like uncanny and not very good. And they had to just pretend like they used the game model. I hate that.
Dude, it could happen.
I wonder if they're gonna have time. I wonder if they're gonna have trouble casting this role. I'll be very interested. I don't think so, but it's just like I think they have to warn people that this is a character.
People are gonna hate you. I don't know. Like Joel and Ellie are infinitely harder to cast, and they did that pretty well. So like I don't know, Abby. You know, Abby really could be anybody. It's just a matter of like finding the right build. You know.
Yeah, 5'10", jacked. Something like that.
That's a rough one.
Yeah. All
right. Let's get into a few of these things. I was curious what you guys thought of this. These have been making the rounds, and we'd be loath to ignore these stories. Again, Video Games Chronicle, I think we'll be citing you guys a few times here. Arcane has confirmed that Redfall, so Redfall is coming out soon on Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, and PC, was originally in development for PS5. Now, this isn't a huge surprise, of course, but in a conversation with IGN France, Google translated by the site, Harvey Smith, who is the studio director of Arcane's spin-off studio in Austin, which is working on this game, said, quote, "We were acquired by Microsoft and it was changed with capital C. They came in and said, no PlayStation 5. We're focusing on Xbox, PC, and Game Pass," end quote. And this was a surprise because obviously they were building the versions concurrently. And of course, Smith, probably realizing what he just said in the interview, says, quote, "It's not very serious. It's even a good decision, I think. It helps to support Game Pass and have one less platform to worry about, one less complexity. Game Pass has a ton of players. It could become our biggest game thanks to 30 million, where I can't remember the exact number of subscribers," end quote. So I think he realized quickly that was going to be picked up by people that were curious about this. This is obviously a no-brainer. Of course, Redfall was in development for PS5. So was Starfield. I don't think anyone should be surprised by that. But a lot of these times, the bills are not even really materializing at this point. They're usually being built off of one PC build, and they start splitting it off later. So I wouldn't read into this too much, but it really did remind people in some way, I think, of, and I think reasonably so, of just the double speak coming out of Microsoft. And I'm curious if you have anything you want to say about that. Dustin,
I understand that it probably wasn't really, when they say in development, it probably was, maybe they had some version running of it on PS5, and maybe even less than that. Maybe it was just kind of planned as they were building out the game on kind of a generalized PC hardware, and then we're going to port later. Could be a bunch of different things. I think ultimately this makes complete sense. At the same time, I think someone in our Discord said this, and it made a lot of sense to me. It's like they probably had a PS5 version of Starfield too. Like there's probably a bunch of PS5 games, and it's like, yeah, they went and bought them. And Phil Spencer specifically, now, I think this is where some of this doublespeak comes in that you talk about or mentioned, Colin, is that he very specifically in that one sit down interview type thing they were doing said that like buying Bethesda was about bringing great exclusive content. It's like, okay, that makes sense. That's why you paid for and bought the company. But now with the different Activision Blizzard stuff, there's a lot of giving players choices to play wherever. It's like, what you really mean by that is giving player choice as long as it's not on PlayStation. Or I guess in their theory, back to something we talked about a lot, is that having Game Pass on PlayStation would be the only way to have that choice. So I think it's kind of a lot of nothing, as you were saying, but at the same time, I get why people are bringing up this comparison as well.
Yeah, I'll say this is like we've already reiterated, it's a no-brainer. The game was, of course, coming to PS5. And I'm not surprised that Microsoft took it away. They bought the company, but they did say they were going to do something differently. And I do think it's important to underline, and I'll just say this unambiguously, as I've said many times, companies lie to you. People lie. They obfuscate. They tell you exactly what they want to tell you. These people are PR trained. These companies spend millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing and direction. Microsoft famously has an entire external PR firm that works on behalf of Xbox. Thank you. And so to me, I don't think too much of it is surprising. I think it's just interesting to hear kind of people's take on it. And I don't know, Chris, I don't know if you agree. I do think it exposes the hypocrisy of Microsoft's message behind the Activision deal, which is like, well, people should have access to games, play games everywhere. And I'm like, well, you clearly don't think that. And I'm not saying you're wrong to do what you're doing, but why are you saying this when you're clearly not doing that? Yeah. And so I think both sides are deeply exposed at this point. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts you want to add on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like to me, it does make sense. If you spend a ton of money on a publisher and a bunch of developers, like it makes sense that some of those titles would be exclusive, and it makes total sense to me that you might want to cancel certain SKUs of projects that wouldn't really behoove you to publish. I also do feel like, yeah, it is hypocritical and it is kind of annoying. There's also standard corporate jargon. It's just like, this is not particularly, I don't know, I'm not surprised by any of this. I think anybody who has a clear or even like a vague understanding of how game development works or how long games take to gestate could reasonably guess that Redfall was planned for PS5 and could reasonably assume that Starfield was planned for PS5. And there's obviously a reason why that's not happening anymore. And I think everybody understands that. It's just I'm more curious about how this information will affect the case that's going on, if it will at all. Because it is a pretty, it's a relatively high profile example of them kind of not doing what they said they were going to do. And I wonder if that's going to like sway in any meaningful way. Maybe not, but it's making the rounds. And it is interesting.
Let's get even deeper with this as we continue to talk about it. Kotaku reports Microsoft says 10 years is plenty of time for Sony to make its own Call of Duty. And so they wrote a piece where Microsoft notes in their response to the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK, quote, Microsoft considers that a period of 10 years is sufficient for Sony as a leading publisher and console platform to develop alternatives to Call of Duty. The 10-year term will extend into the next console generation. Moreover, the practical effect of the remedy will go beyond the 10-year period, since games downloaded in the final year of the remedy can be continued to play for the lifetime of that console and beyond with backwards compatibility, end quote. They say other things too, but okay, so why can't you make it then? Well, I don't understand. This is where the arguments were almost like in this, where it's like Seinfeld, the nexus of the universe, first and first. Where like, I'm like, what are you talking about? If you feel like Sony can do it, then why can't you also do it?
They've only demonstrated the opposite, actually.
Right. I think they really have this interesting play where they're like, we just can't make games. That's the whole play.
They're underplaying themselves, I think.
I agree.
In a lot of ways. And I do think, it's strategic. It is, like they're succeeding. They're making all these fantastic games. We're bumbling over here. We need help. That's kind of what their strategy is in some way. And it's, it's strange because I can't, it feels like every argument that's being made from either side feels like an argument that neither side would ever dream of. Like they would never want to make in a million years. Like Sony being like, we can't do Call of Duty. We can't compete with Call of Duty. We can't make that. We can't do this. And then Microsoft being like, we can't do anything. Like it's such a bizarre, and that both of those arguments boost their own. You know what I mean? Like it's such a bizarro, it's such an insane situation that this is all in. But I don't know. Part of me does feel like I do want Sony to feel, I don't want to say backed into a corner in some way. Like I want them to feel compelled to try this again. You know what I mean? Like I want them to feel compelled to make games like that again, because I feel like they're sitting on a lot of stuff. Like maybe not Killzone exactly, but like the fact that Resistance, again, we brought this up on the show like a million times, but the fact that Resistance is just sitting there withering away on the vine and just completely unplayable to modern hardware is insane to me. And yeah, maybe it's not exactly Call of Duty tier. Maybe it's not going to compete on that level. But I mean, do you just not want to be in this space at all? It's just bizarre to me that they've just sort of like conceded like, oh, well, we can't make anything as good as Call of Duty, so like Call of Duty exists. It's like, no, there's plenty of awesome shooters that have yet to exist. And I do feel like there's this weird idea that because Call of Duty exists, we can't do anything. We can't do any shooters. Like shooters are a pointless avenue. But we got Doom. We got like even just recently, I'm sure we're going to talk about it. Big shooter news over in the PC space. But like compete in that space. It doesn't even matter if you can like dwarf Call of Duty. What matters is that you can provide players with something that's like different and interesting and specific to your platform. And like, why not? Why wouldn't you want that? Why wouldn't you want a first party Sony, like modern PlayStation shooter?
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. Mm-hmm. It's weird. And I feel like this is really the only way that they're ever going to feel compelled to do any of that.
Well, here are several points that I think are worth noting. We can pitch it back to Dustin and see if he has anything he wants to add. The first thing is that I think people, and I think Sony is implying this, but they're not saying it, but I think we all kind of inherently understand it. Sony can make a better game than Call of Duty. That's not all you have to do. You have to get it to work. You have to get it to hit, to find an audience. And I think Sony's argument is not that we couldn't get one of our teams to make a better shooter, which we probably could. It's that we have to find a way to get people to pay attention to it. And Call of Duty has a massive inherent built-in audience that probably will never go anywhere. So no matter how good your game is, it can't pierce that veil. And I think that is part of the implication of the argument. And I think that that's the first part. I think the second part is that, and we mentioned this, I think a week or two ago, Chris, was my opinion is that Killzone is specifically thematically ripe right now based on its themes of apartheid and segregation and all the weird shit that game's about in a more sci-fi setting could be quite appropriate in a very politically charged environment. And so I would like to see Killzone, which I think stands apart more than Resistance, which I think would be, I love Resistance personally, but I think it's more like The Last of Us. We already have that kind of game, right? Killzone is like something dystopian, but not apocalyptic. And I really want to see them take advantage of that. And the third thing I wanted to say is that all of this said, I still believe they're trying to make a few of these games right now. And that they're hedging their bets nonetheless. They were going to do this before Call of Duty, but that this deal has created massive disruption to what their intentions probably were, which is to say, like, we don't have to worry about this very much. And now they're like, oh, we have to worry about this a lot because hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue come through our system every year based on this game that we might not control. And it's, as Jim Ryan said, leaked by the lawyer, Lulu Chang from Activision, when he's like, I don't want a deal. I just want to stop your merger. Like they're just fiduciarily obligated to do this, of course, as we discussed, but it's also not a huge surprise. So I just wanted to throw those few points out as far as, so in other words, I think they're already making some of these games. I do think a Killzone game is going to eventually arrive again. I don't know what it's going to be. There's some rumors of a Killzone VR game. I hope they don't do that. I hope that imagine AAA $150 million game called Killzone. You know, just reboot it, restart it, beautiful idea, start again and see if you can do something with it. And then I just want to say that and to reiterate one more time, that I just think Sony understands that it's deeper than making the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to throw all that out there. Dustin, you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I disagree about Killzone. Not that I don't want a new Killzone or think a new Killzone would be cool. I don't think that it can be the Call of Duty replacement. Specifically because when Call of Duty has reached outside of the modern military shooter, it has been some of their least successful. I mean, I don't know. From a context of how people feel about them now, maybe the sales were still decent, but the futuristic Call of Duty games came and went, and they quickly reverted back to a modern military shooter. So I think if they're looking for something to compete specifically with Call of Duty, they need to look within that zone, right? And it's funny now because I think that there was a time when people were clamoring for another World War II based Call of Duty, and then they got two of them. And by the second one, they're like, we don't want this. We want modern warfare. We want the modern day guns that have like the cool, current day tech, drones and RC cars and crazy lasers, whatever.
Instead of shooting the M1, being a pew.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. People really in the shooter space. I feel like people gravitate towards simplicity in a way that's kind of interesting. I feel like Counter-Strike 2 being revealed over the last few days, and it's just the same, and everybody's really excited about it. Like it's like there's some changes, but it's like mostly the same game. It's like that's awesome. And the fact that that's another example of just like this modern military shooter. That's, by the way, Counter-Strike's a behemoth. A lot of these, I don't know what the idea that like, oh, we can't pierce the veil because Call of Duty it takes up so much of the mind share. I don't really buy that because I feel like a lot of people who play Call of Duty, they play Call of Duty, but like there's a lot of shooter fans who don't play Call of Duty. Battlefield exists for a reason. Counter-Strike exists for a reason. Destiny 2 is huge. Like there's a lot of mindshare for shooters. And it's bizarre to me that they would just sort of like, oh, they roll. And I understand that like, oh, it's deeper than making the game. You got to find your audience. You'll find your audience. If you put your effort and time into it and you put the money into it and you're like doing first person shooter with like the amount of effort and detail that you've put into all of your first party outputs so far, you'll find that audience. No problem. Easily, I would argue.
Yeah, I think though for them though, it's an idea of like there are lots of shooters that have their own huge fan bases, but it's like it's a Venn diagram. It's like Call of Duty is everything, and there are dots within it where a lot of Destiny players are also going to buy Call of Duty. a lot of Apex players are also going to buy Call of Duty, and maybe they just dip in and out. Maybe they're not the long-term whale throughout the year, but that's like a through line, I think, for a lot. And the thing about Call of Duty too is that people will hop in and out by the year for sure.
Yeah.
So about Killzone, Colin, I think you brought up a few weeks ago just the idea of maybe if it's not Killzone, maybe it's SOCOM.
Yeah, SOCOM is something different to me, but I think that should come back too. Like SOCOM is more of a Rainbow Six style game, a Siege specifically, that I think could really work.
I think that makes sense from the context of what the game was, but I don't think they need to adhere to that at all. They can just use the nostalgia of the name and reboot it as something totally new. Yeah. And it makes sense because it's in that zone that I was saying of the modern military shooter. Maybe it is something slightly different as well, but I have to comment one last thing too about this. 10 years is enough time for them to make their own Call of Duty. It's like, dude, Microsoft, you were handed Halo on a silver platter from an amazing team. You had time to set up your own studio to take care of that series. And look what happened.
Yeah.
It's like I said, I made the joke. They've done that in reverse, where they took something that could have been and remained a Call of Duty competitor. Not that, I mean, even during the Bungie time, Call of Duty had taken over Halo by a significant margin, but still stayed a competitor, and you've done the exact opposite. So that's the thing for me, is that I understand you're buying the teams that make Call of Duty, but it's like some Microsoft teams, not all of them, because if you look at Rare with Sea of Thieves, they're doing an amazing job with a live service game. But it's like, dude, I would be careful what you wish for with this, because other teams have not fared so well under their stewardship.
Yeah, Robbie wrote in actually about this and said, hey guys, been hearing about Microsoft saying that Sony can make a shooter to match Call of Duty at the end of the proposed agreement if the deal goes through. Why can't Microsoft do it if it's so easy? Sony is more than capable, with the help of Bungie and the Returnal team, that's Housemarque, to make a fantastic shooter. But it would take many big hits and sequels to match Call of Duty. What say you? Thank you for your time. I actually think that there's a missing component, Robbie, which I wanted to introduce into the conversation here too, which is that Sony doesn't pay for this right now. It's all free money. Very, very important. To develop Call of Duty, each Call of Duty game costs about $300 million to develop and market. To the tune of about $100 million a year. And they have 3 of them going at once. So that's $300 million a year in development costs. It's a lot of money. And Sony looks at it right now and says, we have a deal where we do some marketing, which is probably in the tens of millions. And in return, we get access to the 30% revenue spigot of Call of Duty on our platform, which is huge. I think this is an important key point that Sony can't bring up because it makes them look stupid. And that, of course, Microsoft can't bring up because it's a good point for Sony, which is we have to invest now, which we didn't have to do before. So we actually have to put it on the line to get a game like this. And so there is inherent risk there, too, that I think is important to fill in, that I don't know if a lot of people are really discussing. In other words, we talk about Killzone and SOCOM. Those are Sony games that they would have to build, and they would reap all the benefits. So, too, with this hypothetical shooter that they would make. But that's a whole role reversal for them right now. In other words, it's 30% free money for 0% or maybe 1 or 2% of that money up front for marketing. So it's a problem. I mean, that's why they're taking it so seriously. It's a problem. They could afford it, by the way. Sony makes about $1 billion a quarter in profit. So they're fine. And that's a fraction of that to make the game, but it's meaningful when you're a publicly traded company and you have other bills to pay. And then Zip Davis wrote in and said, hello, Mr. Moriarty, Mr. Furman, and Mr. Gunn. I see a lot of conversation surrounding the Platinum Snitch, aka Crying Jim, and how he is really hurting the trust and goodwill with the PlayStation fan base. I was just curious what you think of Old Cool Lips. And what
the fuck does that mean?
I don't know. Curious what you think Old Cool Lips could do if he actually wanted to get back into the good graces of the hardcore base. I know he doesn't necessarily need to, but it'd be fun to hear you 3 backseat CEO. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful week. I wanted to speak about this really quickly, and you guys can say whatever you want. I don't think Jim Ryan's done anything wrong. I think Jim Ryan's totally fine. In fact, we make fun of Jim Ryan on this podcast a lot and call him Crying Jim and all the rest. But the games are great. The hardware is selling briskly. More games are coming, as we're going to discuss shortly. I don't know that anyone's mad at Jim Ryan in the PlayStation ecosystem. At least that doesn't read to me. I don't know if do you guys agree or disagree? Do you look at him any differently?
I think that he's made some mistakes early on in the launch of the PS5 that made him very easy to make fun of, particularly the "we believe in generations" quote made him not look so good. The free upgrade for Horizon was another thing that they had to walk back on. He kind of had his foot in his mouth. And then just this constant, I'm playing whatever the newest release is. Like, it's like, we can see what you're doing, Jim. But I'm in agreement with you, Colin, in that I think that he's doing just fine. In fact, like, if you look at, I think it was just earlier today revealed that Sony was the Metacritic publisher of the year. So clearly something's going right. The sales are through the roof for the PS5. And so there's some things that he's definitely not done right or said. But overall, when it comes down to what the actual product is and the software that we're getting and paying for, it's been very good. And even like PlayStation Plus Extra, which I'm sure has been a big initiative for him. We always talk about how the Extra is a very good deal from what it seems. They constantly are adding new stuff and good stuff. The premium tier, maybe not so much, but overall, a lot of the initiatives that have been under his wing have been pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jim Ryan is just fine and is probably getting a lot of calls of confidence from behind closed doors at Sony, because they've at least put a huge wrench into this thing, which is, I think, all they really wanted to do. All right. Oh, I wanted to ask, because it's not in here, but as an exit question, do you guys feel like the games industry, since we're talking about Activision, do you guys think the games industry is being hypocritical with its love of Diablo 4 right now, considering how bad Activision Blizzard apparently is, but people have no problem just playing this game, hyping it up? By the way, I discovered today something. I am blocked by the Diablo Twitter account. I don't know why. I've never talked about Diablo or played it.
That's so
some weird shit going on. But nonetheless, what do you guys think about this whole hullabaloo? Chris, have you been paying attention to this at all? The idea that people are hyped up about Diablo 4, but they were just castigating everyone for, some of these same people were just castigating everyone for playing Hogwarts Legacy, and Activision is manifestly worse in almost every way from that situation. It's why it's so, the selectiveness. It's why I feel so comfortable not making these declarations and just telling people to do what they want.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's a hypocrite in some way, but I do think it is funny to watch people kind of like go off about boycotts and then be like, actually, this game's amazing. And it's like, I don't think those two things are necessarily wrong. I think you can advocate for a boycott if you want. I think you can advocate for, like, I think you can criticize a studio and also acknowledge when something is just a high quality. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add, Dustin?
I think it's important to say that it's not hypocritical in my book to be against the leadership and against a lot of the stuff that happened to Activision Blizzard and still like Diablo. That's kind of where I'm at. Obviously, there's a lot of heinous shit from our boy Bobby. Not down with that, of course. But it is hypocritical, like you said, Colin, to be so gung-ho about this Hogwarts Legacy business and then also be totally fine with supporting Diablo, because it's the same kind of thought process and you're choosing to selectively apply it. So there is being a hypocrite in that as well. So I don't know. It's not surprising, though. This is kind of the current. I mean, this is how it is on the internet now. It's like whatever you can say or do to try to win the favor of the crowd or your in-group is what people feel the need to do. And honestly, a lot of times it's just, as long as there's enough time in between, which there has been for Activision and Diablo, it's no big deal anymore. If that beta was closer to when all the shit was going down, I think it would be a different story. But again, not a big deal because there's been enough time.
Yeah, I just think people look like fucking chuckleheads.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest with you, just the selective outrage is why I choose not to really get outraged about any piece of fiction. Because trust me, when 6 Days in Fallujah or one of these other games come, they're going to be back like this. But the actual purportedly abusive workplace violations that happen at these studios, they don't care about that, even though they report on them endlessly. And I saw someone calling out Jason Schreier's hypocrisy about how big of a game he talks about Activision and tries to report on all these things and then just plays their games and promotes their games. You're a hypocrite. You either care or you don't, in my opinion. I think that's fairly obvious. And people just try to have it both ways. They want it both ways so bad. And the audience lets these people have it both ways. And that frustrates me. All right. 2 more quick pieces of news here. This one comes from Video Games Chronicle as well. Bloober Team, the Polish studio making Silent Hill 2 Remake, says the game is pretty much almost done. And Peter Babiano, who's the CEO of the team, told PAP Business, which is I guess, I don't know, some sort of Polish publication, quote, Silent Hill 2 is technically ready. It does not mean the game is finished, but we are close. However, the issue of the release schedule lies with our partners. What the promotion will look like and what the title debut and when the title will debut is not in our hands, end quote. It's an Unreal 5 game. Might be time. Chris, Silent Hill 2, do you think we're going to see it this year?
Silent Hill 2 this year feels... I mean, it's early enough in the year that I would imagine that they might say something about it soon. My only hesitation for something like this is we rarely get... I'm still traumatized by every time a release date or like something is like, hey, it's coming, and then like, bam, it's not. But it is a remake, and it is like Silent Hill 2 it's an important game, but it's also like a fairly simple game. And I do think Bloober Team I feel like they do have the chops to do something like this. We've talked about Bloober Team a lot on the show, and I do feel like whenever they're in charge of their own thing, I feel like it's generally kind of messy. But I do think they're good with like building atmosphere. And if they already have a template to work off of, if they just like showcase and they just flex that skill, then it could be cool. I could believe that it's close to completion. I just wonder where it would fit in, like when they would choose to put it out, if this year. Do you feel like this is like an October? Do you think this is like a Halloween?
Yeah, it seems like maybe, yeah, like imagine we're going to talk about Spider-Man shortly. Spider-Man's clearly coming out in September. So, which is what I predicted originally, but it was obvious that I think that was going to happen. And we know that, I think, pretty definitively, although we can discuss that more in detail later. So you have this fall window, but Sony doesn't always and even often engage in the fall window. They actually, like God of War Ragnarok was kind of an exception. They often just bow out during the fall and let other games breathe because I think they realize there's less competition other times of year, and there's really no reason to put your own marquees in that space. But this is a third-party timed exclusive, so I think you're probably going to be less precious with it. And if you want to release it in a timely way, I think you release it in October. So it seems to me, I don't know, Dustin, if you agree that seems like a possible timeline. It seems a little truncated, though, because if you go back and look, Bloober announced their partnership with Konami only 2 years ago. The work could have been underway before that. And if you're doing a pound for pound remake and really just rebuilding the game in Unreal 5, then, which is not just really, I mean, it's hard work, but you don't have to do any of the design work and stuff like that. At least you have the whole game to just rebuild from the ground up. You know what you're doing. Very Blue Point-like approach. So perhaps they can do it more quickly. So I still feel like that 3 years would probably be a reasonable amount of time to spend on a project like that, noting that you're not really doing any original work. And so that could be a very good PlayStation 5 game that you could expect to maybe see at the vaunted and much rumored May showcase as a game that is announced with a release date at that time.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Specifically, Bloober right now, I'm looking at this Video Game Chronicle article, their remake of Layers of Fear, which I think they changed. We joked about it being Layers of Fears.
Yeah.
I think they heard us laughing at them, and I think they changed that name.
Yeah, that
but I'm going to have to look in a minute. That's releasing in June. And so that would kind of, if it was October, give them enough time to kind of get things ready, go gold or whatever. But something I've always wondered, and maybe this is so not really relevant, is there some element that people want to buy and play scary games in the month of October because of Halloween? Is that a boost to the game? Clearly, it's not necessary. We see games like Dead Space and now Resident Evil 4 come out. You don't need to have a spooky game in October, but I think this is a perfect timing thing that's like, yeah, it's the spooky month, release the spooky game, and it fits in with your other releases, particularly Spider-Man in September.
Indeed. Yeah, I think it later this year is possible. I think we'd probably see it more. I think it would be up to Sony to say more. Perhaps there's a marketing deal in place So 1 year exclusive. So something to play around with this fall at least, but we'll keep an eye on that. Silent Hill 2 remake coming at an undetermined time. Finally, I wanted to ask you guys, this was from gamesindustry.biz, although this was widely reported. Amazon is, so the big company Amazon is cutting 9,000 jobs, but 400 of those jobs will come from Twitch. And apparently this layoff has already happened and has been blamed on the quote unquote current macroeconomic environment. I was wondering what you guys thought about this and what you think the future of Twitch might be. It seems like, so here, I'll give you my outsider's layman's perspective. And Dustin, we can start with you, I guess, is I read Twitch as a company in decline. And it seems like finally there has been some sort of erosion of their product by competitors that doesn't seem to be overwhelming the system yet and really drawing people away, but that is doing it very slowly. And so YouTube has long been a competitor and I think long failed, but it seems like they're really trying harder and harder and more to get people to go over. I think Rumble is becoming a very relevant platform that's starting to attract people in other realms. And I'm not going to be surprised if they start. They're actually stupid that they don't aim at people that play games yet. But,
Rumble?
you know, Russell Brand's show is on there. Clint Greenwald's show is on there. So they're getting a lot of pretty big creators in the political and kind of social space. And then I've seen these other things, these other smaller services. I think Kick is one of them, or I think that was something where they pay their creators like twice as much as Twitch. So I feel like people are coming for them. And it's important to remember when Amazon bought Twitch, they outbid Google, who wanted Twitch. So Google has long been in pursuit of this, and obviously they used YouTube as the conduit for it. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts, because I know you stream on there sometimes. I have a little check mark on there and everything, but I haven't streamed in a long time.
Yeah. So I think Twitch has had a lot of issues that they have chosen to neglect because they've been on top. The number one thing you hear from a lot of Twitch streamers is about the cut and how they simply do not want to bend on giving a greater cut to their streamers. And it's funny to me because I see, and this is mostly from an outsider looking in, because I'm really not super involved with like the Twitch world. But what I do notice is that this is the number one complaint, that they aren't paying enough. And that instead of making it a good opportunity for all of their streamers, they would rather go and lock in exclusivity contracts with their biggest people. And not so it's for them, it's more about these big time streamers than caring about everybody overall, because these big time streamers also get different cuts than everybody else. And so you have YouTube on the other side, which you're right, they totally fucked up their launch, at least into this live streaming stuff. A lot of reports of how live streaming was hurting people's channels instead of helping it. Like, that's the number one thing you don't want to hear. It's like, oh, if I use this service, it's going to hurt my livelihood. Okay, let's not do that. Let's go somewhere else. So the fact that YouTube finally is turning it around, it seems like it's obvious that YouTube should be better than Twitch, because you have the opportunity to have all of your output as far as a digital content creator almost all in one space. You can have your regular videos, you can have your streams, and then you can cut down your streams and put them all on your YouTube, and people can all be contained in this one place.
And
instead of being like, oh, get me over here on Twitch, get me here on YouTube, my uploads go over here. It's like, no, Twitch doesn't have that. They have, you can watch their replays and stuff like that, but they don't have a robust video playback system like YouTube at all. Yeah. So the fact that YouTube finally is starting to turn it around and make this a compelling aspect for creators makes sense. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that, Twitch is seeing rough times right now. The thing they just need to get their head out of their ass, as far as I can tell, and start making it a compelling place for people to create content, and instead of just signing deals. Chris, you're much more involved in and know a lot more than me as far as like this business. You stream a lot more than I do. Do you feel like that's correct from me, just kind of outside checking, like seeing how people are interacting with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do think. Yeah, let me back it up a little bit. I feel like the way that YouTube has gone about competing. I mean, we saw a lot of streamers kind of leaving Twitch and going to YouTube gaming in the last year, and that's no doubt like a huge deal. I do think just YouTube is just more of a robust system. I do think because it's a more robust system, it's got a lot more problems. I think Twitch's finite focus allows it to get away with a lot more, because it's like people don't expect good video playback on Twitch because they're not there for that. And you know, people expect people don't expect like a robust bulletin or post system, because you know that's not what they're there for. And in some ways, I did for a while prefer the separation that existed, where it's like my YouTube videos are here, Twitch is here. Twitch is for live streams, because that's all it is. Like if you're on Twitch, there's no confusion as to why you're there. Whereas on YouTube, it's a little muddy because there's such a huge history on YouTube. Like there's a huge history of YouTube being for a very specific thing. This is video content. This is pre-made stuff. This is clips. This is whatever. And so now that people are streaming there, it's actually made YouTube a far more nebulous place. It's a little bit harder to figure out, but I do think generally, you know, I think the reason Twitch is kind of falling a little bit is not only because YouTube and other competitors are rising to the occasion. I do think it's just because Twitch is not really doing a good job of updating the site or really paying attention to what people want. Like Twitch has looked basically identical. For I can't even tell you how, like since I started, I think.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
definitely.
sure. Like there's very little iteration that I'm sure like there's some like minimal UI changes, and maybe there's like obviously Streamlabs integration and all that stuff, and that's cool. But YouTube's transformed far more, and in some ways I think it's to its detriment. But obviously in other ways I think it's to its benefit. Like obviously shorts are a big deal, UI changes are a big deal. The fact that there's a community tab where you can basically tweet there is kind of huge. And so I don't think the crown is going to go to these smaller places. I don't think Rumble has really any shot. It kind of reminds me of like VidMe when that was a thing, which is like VidMe or Vimeo. And it's like, yeah, I mean, people are there, but I mean, let's be real. Like the second you bill something, and I feel like this is Rumble's general kind of problem, is that it's like Rumble is billed as like a very political thing. It's like very much like this is free speech. And inherently when you do that, you're going to attract the most passionate and by extension the most annoying people in the world. And I think that's why YouTube, Twitter, and all these other platforms succeed, is because they don't market themselves that way. They market themselves to everybody. It's like YouTube is not a political place. It's just a place where people go. Twitter is not a political place either. It's a place where people go. You can find all sorts of like insane takes on Twitter, but like Rumble is like, you know, you go to Rumble and the first thing you see is Ben Shapiro, even if you don't have an account. And it's like, I don't know if I want that, you know, if I'm just trying to like go to a video platform and just see what's on there. But I don't know, man, Twitch is in a weird spot. What's more confusing about that is that it's Amazon. Like, how do they not? I guess they just don't care really that much.
Well, I'd argue that Amazon has spent a lot of money in video games and has made very little in return. And I would say that Twitch is an anomaly in terms of its relative success compared to whether you're talking about, what was that, the whole Lumberyard initiative with their engine and all of the different aborted games.
True, yeah. But it's they bought Twitch, didn't they?
Yeah, right, exactly. As I was saying earlier, like when Twitch was available, YouTube was the one that wanted to grab them, and Amazon outbid them. And at the time, people thought that was pretty strange because I honestly think that's probably the right suitor in some way, because although Google probably would have given it space and time too, it's just that they could withstand losses because Amazon is just so big. But one thing I will say that's a big surprise to me about this is they laid off 400 employees. I would imagine Twitch doesn't even need 400 people to work at it. And this goes back to where I don't understand how these companies get so big. What the fuck are you doing at a place like Twitch? How is that possible? You have one product. So you would assume that it's all about engineering this one product. Everyone is focused on making this one thing work as best as possible. And then around them, so engineers and all that. And then around the margins, you have people tending to your company, tending to the community and all that. But 400 people being laid off, it's like these companies are so bloated I know Reddit has something like 600 employees or something, or 700. And to me, that seems even extraordinarily high, but much more appropriate than these companies with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees. You can't possibly be doing anything. The inefficiencies at these companies are so maximal that if they just realize that they can get some smart people in there and just basically shake that tree loose, that they could probably have a better product with 10% of the people that work there. Straight up. And I know that might be brutal efficiency, but it's true. And I would just point out, and I know that we have a dispute about this, but I would just say Twitter has largely worked the same way with almost no one working there, apparently. So what the fuck was everyone doing? That's a big question. And I'm sure that they looked at their books and were like, well, we have too many people here. The Twitch doesn't need a staff this big. But I thought this was interesting, guys. If you go to the blog from Dan Clancy, who's the CEO, he says, like many companies, in part, he says, like many companies, our business has been impacted by the current macroeconomic environment, and user and revenue growth has not kept pace with our expectations. In order to run our business sustainably, we've made the very difficult decision to shrink the size of our workforce. So he's blaming the macroeconomic environment. I think that's obvious. The macroeconomic environment would include inflation, the credit crisis, and the banking run, the Ukraine war. It's all fucking everything up. But it's important to note that their own internal metrics show growth less than they projected. That's bad news. Bad news. And I would describe Twitch as this, in my opinion, as an outsider with not too much information. From my perspective, they seem vulnerable. And I wonder what will come of it, if anything. It's kind of like the Call of Duty conversation, because Chris, you were talking about Rumble, and I agree with you. Rumble is one of those places where you get audience capture really badly because of the nature of the early adopters, which is why things need to be as agnostic as possible. But you have a similar situation here where no matter how good a competitor is to Twitch, or no matter how good a competitor is to YouTube, it probably won't happen. In fact, I think monopolies are safer on the internet than they've ever been, because it's like, can you imagine in your mind a new social media platform right now?
No.
What would it be? How would that work?
Well, Microsoft tried with Mixer,
right?
And that didn't work. And there's been countless YouTube competitors over the years, and it just doesn't work because the nature of like what these things are so expensive to run, and no startup could really ever hope to even come close, especially not within a reasonable time frame, because a lot of these websites got to where they were through years and years and years and years and years of testing. Public beta testing, I would argue. There were a lot of things. YouTube's changed dramatically over the last 10 years, and a lot of changes at the time were viewed as like negative. I mean, like what the hell? They did a Google Plus integration, and that was like a whole mess. A bunch of accounts got yeeted off the platform because they couldn't connect email addresses that weren't Google email addresses to their. I lost like a really old YouTube channel to that, and it's really dumb. But at the same time, when you ask for a competitor, you're asking for a new site to pop in and go through 10 years of rigorous beta testing and audience testing in a fraction of the time. It's not going to happen. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's as simple as attrition. If you have Facebook, right? Facebook came out in 2004. So it's almost 20 years. If you have a new social media thing and it's better and better and better, you still have to just fight against Facebook's pure attrition. Just its very existence and everything it offers to people historically, their pictures and their conversations and all of that. It's the same reason why people stay with Apple phones or they do different things. It's like the longer it goes, the more likely you are to stay. And that's why I think Discord is probably the newest thing that has any decent reputation or size that has come out that has changed the way people have communicated with each other. A lot of the stuff is just legacy. Whether it's Twitter, which is old, Facebook is old, but LinkedIn is old.
Yeah, but Discord also fills a need. And right now, like Twitter fills a need, YouTube fills a need, even Twitch fills a need. There's like, what needs are left? Because Skype didn't function nearly as well as Discord did. TeamSpeak was a tedious mess. You can't just go through, and most every single other chat software is kind of shit compared to Discord. I remember when Discord first started, it was kind of a mess. And it still arguably is, but it functions a lot better now. And now that it's integrated into our consoles and our PCs, our phones, it's not going nowhere. If you have a Discord competitor, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you could possibly do. Except maybe I don't know, have a free speech Discord competitor, and then you get a bunch of weird, confusing people. I don't know, man. It's a bizarre. Social media is a bizarre landscape and a bizarre battleground.
Indeed. All right, my friends. That's it. Let's get into what we're playing. Chris, we'll stick with you. It says here you're playing Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, obviously Resident Evil 4 is right on the horizon for us. If you're listening to this, you're probably already playing it, but I don't really have the time or the mind share to dig into anything new or particularly deep. So I'm kind of jumping back into, I never finished the remake of Shadow of the Colossus, and I know the game like the back of my heart, like the back of my hand, like the back of my brain, everything. That game is instilled in me. So I'm just taking it one step at a time, just kind of knocking out a Colossus or two before going to bed. And it's really good. I love Shadow of the Colossus, but probably my favorite game ever. And I'm just playing that until I can jump into Spanish castles and shoot infected people in the head and buy stuff from that kindly merchant. Just killing time, basically.
Right on. Yeah, I'm excited too. I pre-ordered it a couple of days ago when I saw the pre-order or the preload was up. So I was like, yeah, let's get this done. And so the timeline's counting down. We're recording this on the Thursday. I'll probably just play it on Friday afternoon after we record Constellation. And I'm just really, really stoked about it too. I've been just avoiding everything about it. I've seen virtually nothing, which is really exciting. I mean, I know Resident Evil 4, so I don't think it's going to be that much of a surprise, but it's I'm excited to see what it's all about. Dustin, what about you?
Yeah, so wanted to wrap up Metroid Prime Remastered before Resident Evil 4, because of course that's going to be priority number 1 starting today for listeners. And I gotta say, I don't really like this game. In fact, I think it's, especially based on these remastered reviews, kind of overrated. I made a tweet about this that caused quite a conundrum. And I don't think it's a bad game by any means, but I think this game has a lot of issues in terms of its pacing and its particularly the backtracking. And I know that this is a tough thing when I've mentioned this to people, in that it's a Metroid game. It's supposed to have backtracking, but I was trying to figure out what the reason why I didn't enjoy the backtracking was so annoying, and mainly because there is too much of it. I think in this game, the way that it's designed, you have to traverse certain particular areas over and over again. And I think that part of it too is that backtracking is fun when the combat is fun. And I just don't think the combat in this game is all that fun either. The main cannon, the first one you get, is practically a pea shooter. The bosses in this game too, particularly towards the end, are super spongy. The second to last boss in particular, there's this last phase where he has such a small window that you need to hit him that is so annoying. And the other thing too, and this is probably the thing I got the most flack for, but I'd like to explain, is that this game has no checkpoints. It's very old school in that way, and I respect it in some ways. But it's bothersome to me when you either pick up a new item or you defeat a boss, and if you die afterwards, you have to do it again. That's annoying to me, just straight up. I understand this challenge aspect of okay, you got to gauge how far are you willing to go? How desperate do you need to figure out to pace your health and your missiles or whatever to the next checkpoint or the next save? I get that. But this game didn't get the balance right for me. The remaster job is great. If they do Metroid Prime 2, I will check that out also, because I think Metroid is cool. Overall, I love that world. I love the design of Easy now. Samus,
yeah.
Samus or Samus, which I know that has been a conundrum.
It's Samus.
Samus is what they say in the Smash Brothers game I played.
I know, but
deal.
it's Samus. I mean,
I think either one is okay. I'll say Samus now, though. I think the design of Samus is awesome. I think she's cool as fuck. But this game didn't hit for me. I love Super Metroid. But to be fair, I played Super Metroid with save states on the Super Nintendo Classic. So I don't know. Some people will discredit that. But overall, not super pumped on Metroid Prime Remastered. I'm more excited, though, to say I've been checking out this PSVR game. It's not a new game by any means, but it was recently updated for the PlayStation VR 2. You can get the upgrade for $10, and they gave this game away on PlayStation Plus a few years back, I believe. So if you want to get that $10 upgrade, it's Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners. This is a game that Lockmort in particular has pestered me for years to play. And the situations I had, like on the original PSVR 1, it was like really, really low res. And then I was trying to play it on PC, but found that it was annoying on the Quest to like do the air link. It never quite was right for me. So I decided to check this out. This game is pretty dang cool. It is really heavy on like gravity and physics interactions. And so if you have a certain like a big axe or something, it'll purposely make your hands like move slower for more momentum. And damn, this game is violent. You're like picking up bottles and slamming them into either zombies or people's faces. You kind of got to like rip them out. You can get shivs or whatever. You shoot people in the head. It's brutal, but it has this really fun loop of you have a home base. You venture out into Louisiana, wherever. I can't remember where it's at. You venture out, you gather up supplies, you take them back, build new weapons, and it really is a cool PSVR game, and it looks really great on PSVR 2. They did a nice job upgrading it. It looks super sharp. I think this is a 90 hertz refresh rate game, which that's something important to point out about a lot of PSVR 2 games. A lot of them are running at 60, which is making them running at 60 and then using some magic in the background to kind of like blend them into 120 frames, which is definitely not as ideal. But this game runs at 90. And it's really cool. They just released part 2 a few days ago, but I thought, the $10 upgrade, I don't need to jump right into the second one, but this game is really neat. I'm enjoying it. And I don't know if I'll finish it, but for $10, why not? I'll definitely be playing more later tonight.
Right on. Cool, man. For me, I platinumed Wild Arms 2. Took about 40 hours. I used a walkthrough. You wouldn't be able to do that quickly without that. It was my 138th platinum trophy. I enjoyed playing it. It was nostalgic in some way, just based on the look and feel. But I was, again, so perplexed by how little of basically anything of the game I remembered. So I will say, badly localized, as I noted last week, and kind of nonsensical. It's pretty interesting how much of a fall it actually is from the first one in almost all ways. But it was fun nonetheless. If you're a JRPG fan and you're interested in kind of the old nature of them, especially at that interesting period in the late 90s and into 2000, I would check it out. And then feeling that I wanted to keep playing a JRPG, I bought and started up Octopath Traveler 2 on PS5, and I've played it for about 5 hours. I mean, so I'm not that new to this, because I must admit that Micah played the original Octopath Traveler on Switch, and I watched her play it for quite a bit. So I know how the game works and the way it looks, but playing it for the first time, that system, that 2D HD style that they're doing, which they did with Triangle Strategy, I think, which they're going to do with Dragon Quest 3, which I'm really excited about, the remake of Dragon Quest 3, which is going to be super, super cool because I love that game. It's a very, very high quality, well-written, beautiful, compelling, deep, and difficult game. I mean, I don't know what else to say it except to just immensely compliment it. It's pretty incredible that there are people making games like this still. And I'm not saying JRPGs or the 16 and 32-bit style JRPGs that we get a lot of, especially from the indie space. I'm working on one, right? It's not like they're out of nowhere, and they're all inspired by certain things, and that's great. But everything we do in our space, in that space, I should say, in that indie space, is kind of restrained by budget and time, experience, all the rest. I play a game like Octopath Traveler 2, and I feel like it's working on all cylinders. Like this is the natural evolution of the 32-bit era of role-playing games that we never really got, because everyone, even in the PS1 era, certainly, and on N64, of course, with like Quest 64 and all these random games, people wanted to get into 3D. And I think that was a mistake to just get into 3D, because I think part of the appeal of a lot of these old games was the aesthetic, specifically the pixel art, and to make some sort of really beautiful, I'm pretty sure it's on Unreal Engine, but this creation of this sub engine where you have this 3D world with sprightly characters and that same beautiful art, but it's so refined and higher resolution and all the rest. Very little to complain about in that regard. I do think that there's some, but if I had a preference, I would still prefer just a beautiful 2D game, straight up. And it doesn't have to be in a 2D plane. You know, a game like Final Fantasy VI is 2D, but it's not in a 2D plane. So a great example would be, and I always bring it up, Symphony of the Night. I think is like one of the most beautiful games of all time. And you're not going to make that game any more beautiful. And I feel like the game could even potentially be more beautiful if they fully embraced the design precepts of that time, which is like flattening things out and doing all of that. So I feel like I'd probably even want that more than what this is. But based on what this is, the reason I think that this works is because it is beautiful. It does work. And I think it's attractive to people. I think it's more accessible. It reads better to a lot of people. And so there's a lot of Saga Frontier in this game, in my opinion. And I'm not a huge fan of Saga Frontier, the old Squaresoft game, and that has continued, and all the different characters and melding them together into different stories. But this is just so much better written. And I've done Throne's story so far, who is a thief. And then I've also done the Scholar's story. I can't remember his name. It's like Alvord or something like that. And I like how they meet up and how you can like optionally play the person's story, and it's all just kind of non-linear and cycles through all the different characters. And I don't know, man, there's something really cool about this game. I really, really like it a lot. And my only complaint, and this is a big complaint I had with the original Octopath and watching Micah play it, it actually bothered me a lot, was when you fight human bosses, they blow them up. Like the sprite becomes huge, but you remain small. Now, it's true that this is the case in Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy games back in the day, but I think it read different. I actually went on our Discord and used an example. I was talking about this and used an example of Kefka, the first Kefka fight from Final Fantasy VI, and I put a screenshot of it up. And it's the same thing. He's like big and all like beautiful looking, and everyone else is all the chibi style things, but it reads differently because it's 2D, as if it's what I often say as this is a representation of what's happening. It's not actually happening, or you're not really there. But when you enter the 3D space, I feel like my expectations as a player change. And so when I see those big characters, I'm like, this kind of looks goofy. You're fighting like a captain human, and he's just huge, and it's beautiful, but it just looks dumb. It just doesn't read the same. So there's some design philosophies that they could definitely change. And I also don't know how the trappings of modernity, like maps, side quest tracking and journaling and all that kind of stuff, it kind of fits clumsily in the game, I think. I don't know that games like this are made for that structure, or at least people haven't quite figured out how to order it right yet, or how to make it look right. Because even games like RFL and other JRPG-inspired games recently suffered from the same problem. So yeah, Octopath Traveler 2, I'm going to continue to play it. I'm going to get distracted because I'm going to go to Resident Evil 4, but this is going to be, they're very different. I can play those games at the same time, and I suspect I'll be done with RE4 in like a couple days. So I don't know that I'm going to need too much time with it. It's not the longest game in the world. So yeah, Octopath Traveler 2 has been really great. Did you play this one, Dustin, at all?
I played a bit, I think, when they had like the free demo on Switch, but I wasn't really into the first one. Holly played a lot of the first one, and she actually decided to not finish it after being probably at least 20 hours into the game, because she just kind of had enough. To me, and this is the biggest thing I'm curious with the second one, is that I didn't like that you have all of these separate stories, and I understand that's the point of the game, but it bothered me, to my understanding, that they all come together, but then they don't really act as a unit after that. It's kind of so focused on these individual stories. And that's less appealing to me, as one of my favorite aspects of JRPGs is about the relationship between characters and how they operate together, and how when you get a new character, that changes the dynamic of the group. And so that's a very specific thing for me, why I don't know if I would want to invest in this game. But I'm still curious about it because I know that it looks so odd. Like I love that 2D, 3D style. I think this game looks amazing.
2D HD, just to protect you.
2D HD, right?
Yeah.
And particularly when they released that Dragon Quest 2D HD game, I'm definitely
Oh man, I
checking
can't
that
wait.
out.
I can't wait. Dragon Quest 3 is so good. Yep.
Yeah. I've never played that, so that is very appealing to me. But yeah, I'm curious about the perspective, and unfortunately we don't have this. Maybe if Micah plays it, how this compares to that first game.
Yeah, I'm wondering. So I don't know where it was. It might have been on IGN or somewhere else when I was researching the show. It didn't seem like it was necessary to bring up. I don't know why I didn't though, which was someone finally asked a producer at Square Enix, where is Octopath Traveler 1 on PlayStation? And they admitted that they were looking into releasing it, and they were thinking of different options, and that they didn't want to release it beforehand, and they didn't want to release it at the same time. And my whole question was like, why? This game's really good, so why wouldn't you want us to have this first one too? I don't understand that. It's going to be difficult for you to release them in opposite orders, although they might end up doing that, and I would play the first one too, although I'm much more familiar with it than I went into this one really blind. And we talked about it on Sacred Sales Saga, which will go live imminently for patrons when this publishes. And Octopath Traveler 2 did not chart last month on PlayStation 5, which I thought was shocking, and really even more insulting and more shocking now that I have played the game and realize how high quality it is. I've seen people saying like this is the game of the year, and I'm like, yeah, it might be. As I'm playing it, it really might be. Here's one major thing that I wanted to say. So Tactics Ogre Reborn came out last year, and I was criticizing it for its voice acting. Not that it was bad, but that it didn't fit. And that's more of a traditional 2D game that I would say, well, it's technically 3D, but, a more 2D styled or stylistic game where I don't think it read well, the voice acting. But the voice acting in this game is both high quality and just seems to work. I think because people are more differentiated from each other. I think the sprite work reads much cleaner and things like that. So I did want to say that the voice acting is very high quality and the writing is really high quality too. Although Micah and I were making fun of one of the characters who keeps saying that he's like, I feel a burning in my breast or something like that. Right. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But no, it's not that it was funny one off. He says that he's feeling something in his breast over and over again. And I'm like, dude, it's so awkward. Not from a sexual, like, ooh, but it's like, no one taught. Why do you keep saying that? Why did no one in the localization change the word? Get a fucking thesaurus. For God's sake. Oh my God.
That sounds like the first game. When Holly was playing it, we kept joking because this one character, when you would do an attack, would say, that'll do her. Like that. Oof. Over and over. That'll do her. Oof. And so we would just be like making dinner or something.
That's rough.
And they'll be like, can you grab me that? And it'd be like, that'll do her. Like just over and over. It's like, stop. Yeah. But that's a problem with a lot of games where you have, I mean, that was the thing in Hogwarts Legacy that we've joked about many times, like off on another adventure. Which they fixed that.
Apparently. Oh, they did?
Right when I was finished playing the game.
Adventure. That put me off that lady entirely. Like that one that I don't like it when you pass a character in a game and they arbitrarily start a conversation, even though statistically the game knows you're running past them.
Yeah.
Like it's like why it just breaks it ironically breaks the immersion despite the fact that it's done with the exact opposite purpose. Let me start the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Totally, 100%. I love it because you're right. It is awkward. It's like, oh, hello.
Yeah, it's just like trails off. Every video game protagonist in games like these must be the rudest people imaginable.
Definitely,
because people they know and have relationships with constantly start up conversations with them, and they just run past them without even a secondary acknowledgement.
And they just busted all their houses and shit. Yeah. I love that in Japanese role-playing games. And I actually get annoyed in the couple of games that acknowledge it as being weird. Well, I'm like, no, it's part of the weird tradition. I get to walk into everyone's houses, steal things out of treasure chests, talk to them. They're not confused why I'm in their house in the middle of the night. It's good shit. Not everything's got to be a Todd Howard game, Get a little bit of that Japanese flavor. And that's why I say JRPG, not an insult. Not an insult at all.
Oh, yeah.
Octopath Traveler 2 is a JRPG-ass JRPG in all the right ways, and all the ways that make me tingle. You know what I mean?
Great.
That make them nips hard.
All right, well.
Let's move on. Let's get into the news, my friends. There's 4 pieces of news I wanted to talk to you about that are of a bigger variety this week. And we're going to start with this this first one, which is number 1. And I am really interested in how this all happened. I just think it's funny. All right. The beans have been spilled. Spider-Man 2 is coming to PlayStation 5 in September. Why do we report this so confidently? Because the voice actor for Venom, a character that purportedly plays prominently in the game's story, said so, undoubtedly to the consternation of both PlayStation PR team and studio Insomniac Games, which have been shockingly disciplined in not saying a word. Other than that, in the most recent news burst, the title would come to PS5 in 2023. The September release window comes from Tony Todd, the voice of Venom in Spider-Man 2 and a deeply experienced actor with well over 100 credits in film, television, and video games since the mid-'80s, so he should probably know better. But in a Twitter post, he said the following, which he later deleted, quote, "Looks like September, massive publicity coming in August, commercials start dropping in August, so I'm told," end quote. Before deleting that tweet, however, he followed with a picture of him in what appears to be his pool, writing, quote, "No more hints about Spider-Man 2, it was all a fever dream, blame it on jet lag, who knows, I might not even be Venom," end quote. Of course, the details have already been spilled, so the only question is whether you believe Tony Todd would be in the know. And the answer is almost certainly yes. Sony and Insomniac likely alerted Todd to this news to prepare him for his press tour, a common practice, particularly pre-COVID, for Sony AAA games, and as he's an old Hollywood pro, junkets and the like are no doubt common for him. And as already noted, Sony confirmed Spider-Man 2 for a 2023 release back in 2022. So the game was, of course, first revealed back in 2021, and we haven't seen a single frame of gameplay or pretty much anything else for that matter since. 2008's Spider-Man, a one-time PS4 exclusive that has since migrated to both PlayStation 5 and PC, is Insomniac's biggest game ever. And indeed, Sony purchased Insomniac outright after the game launched, no doubt enamored with its longtime partner's stellar performance. To date, Spider-Man and its 1.5 follow-up Miles Morales, which launched on PS4 and PS5 in 2020, have sold nearly 40 million copies to date, a staggering figure, making Spider-Man 2 one of the most important PS5 games to date, and the exclusive perhaps primed to sell best. As for Insomniac, the team is also working on another Marvel project, Wolverine, with an unknown release window in mind on PS5. Chris, I'm curious what you think. Certainly, Tony Todd knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine, especially because you mentioned that he had. It's kind of funny because you mentioned that he's had like a lot of credits in the games industry and film and television for many, many years. Enough that
he was in
better.
Platoon.
Yeah, which is interesting, but it also brings. It's funny. He should know better, but also because he knows better, it's why I also trust this information more. Obviously. So like, yeah, I think it is coming in September. I think that was our guess as well, that we all kind of generally agreed that that's when it would happen anyway. Didn't seem like a November game quite exactly. And didn't the last Spider-Man game come out in September as well?
Yeah, September 7th.
Yeah. So I think it's a reasonable assumption that was going to be the case anyway. It's nice to know that at least there is some insider confirmation that it won't be pushed out of the year, although that was also not really that much of a doubt either because Insomniac's pretty good with that. Yeah, I mean, I believe it. It's just so funny that he didn't think to not say this. You know, like
I agree. Here's what I think happened. Here, I'm going to give you my impression of what happened. Okay.
Sure.
He got a call from either Insomniac or his agent, or they had some sort of call, and they were like, "So Tony, here's the deal. You're going to start traveling for the game in August, and we're going to have an ad blitz at that time. The game's going to come out in September, so we're going to need you for these dates or whatever." Which is probably what's going to happen. He's going to go and do the rounds and maybe be at comic conventions and whatever to promote the game. And I think that he got that information and then he told us all. And that's what and that's literally what I think happened is he just got off the phone or off a Zoom call and he was just excited and he said it. And he's very experienced in movies and TV where this wouldn't be a big deal, but he has done enough games to know better if you look at his IMDb. So Dustin, what do you think about this situation? First of all, do you believe that he wouldn't be in the know? And do you believe that will be swinging in September?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely in the know. And I got to say, this photo he posted, I'll make sure it's in the video version.
It's scary,
as well,
honestly.
Is I just love. Okay, he says no more hints about hashtag Spider-Man 2. It was all a fever dream. Blame it on jet lag. Who knows? I might not even be hashtag Venom. And there's a lot to pull out of this picture of him in the pool. I mean, it's an indoor pool. It's got flames on the side. He's just kind of chilling out.
Mhm.
There's a, I've been trying to use this term less because I think it's kind of lame, but this photo has a vibe. Absolutely, it's got a vibe to it. I don't know.
It scares me. Like, this is a really scary photo. Like, I don't know
There's like
exactly-
a shadow on his mouth in particular because it's underwater.
Yeah. What it is like it's the distortion that the water is causing to happen to his head. So he looks like he's got like this normal like brawny head, but then this really tiny baby's jaw.
It looks like a clown mouth.
It's very scary. Like, it's a really odd, and it's also darker than like because of the shadow. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a really fucking ominous. I want to draw this like as is, like without the water, but just like taking like this image as is at face value, because it's a horrifying image.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's fantastic. I'm so glad we were blessed with this image tied to
like
all these news stories about this report. A lot of them have this image in it, which is just great. But yeah, I think that totally makes sense. I think when we were talking about predictions, I had leaned towards a little later in the year, but I think this still is definitely obviously within the realm of what we would expect. And I think the big thing now is just that it's going to be Starfield versus Spider-Man, the big showdown. If it's the same day, which is certainly possible, that would be really interesting. But either way, these games are going to be, I don't know, unfairly compared because they're not similar games at all, but because they are the two big competitors coming out in the same month, they will be compared. And so it'll be an interesting time. I'll be playing both of them, of course, but it'll be cool to see that level of heated competition.
Well, Sony will be talking about how many games they sold. Microsoft will be talking about how many people played Starfield, and then people will argue about which one matters more. I've heard the date bandied around of September 29th, which is a Friday. I think that date came from the release of some ancillary piece of gear or something. I don't know if that's indicative of the game's release date or not, but that is a Friday, and that is entirely possible. And I would argue that that's, you really have like September 1st, 8th, 15th, 22, and 29 if you want to do it on a Friday. I would assume it would be a Friday release. So we'll see. But we have a few questions, or a couple of questions here from the audience about this, because there's really not much more to say. I mean, Sony's obviously not going to confirm it. I am sure they were flipping out and freaking out about it. And I feel a little bit bad for them. I mean, not really, but I feel bad for them in the sense that they actually have been incredibly disciplined and nothing has leaked about this game, which is, they run a pretty tight ship over there at Insomniac, and they should be congratulated for that. So it's a little disappointing that just a flippant voice actor with experience that should probably know that things are different in this industry ruined it. But I totally believe this. I think obviously he knows, and I think it's literally as simple as him being told. And so Dylan Bika, how do you think you say that? Dylan Bhikha, Bika, I would say. Bika? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm fucking butchering it, I'm sure. Hi, Sacred Kings. The Venom actor release date got me thinking, is the gaming industry too secretive? Do you think the industry should just disclose mostly everything they are working on, like the movie industry, when movie projects like the MCU movies are announced far in advance? Thanks, guys. No, I think it's fine this way. Well, you seem like you have something to say here, Dustin, so I'll go to you. I mean, what do you, for me, I feel like the secrecy is strange. Like the level of secrecy, I don't quite understand it. But the more you see people's early reactions to games, the more this kind of thing is going to happen, because they're going to have to hide stuff and hope for fair coverage. And I think that that's part of it. For instance, you see the Gollum Lord of the Rings game is already like way underwater with people, right? Because it's been shown so much and people think it's not going to be very good. And they just have preconceived notions of it. You see that obviously with Suicide Squad, big negative reaction to it. So what do you think?
I think that the movie industry is too open about stuff they're going to do. And half the time you hear stuff that never ends up actually happening. It's like, oh, this guy attached to this script, this movie, could this movie be happening? Could this happen? I hate that shit. That's annoying. That's like noise to me. There's no excitement to me at this point when they're like, oh, this director is being attached to this film. because I remember that I used to get really excited because that was always the story about BioShock. This person's writing a BioShock script. This person's writing this, and it's been like that for over a decade now that you hear about a BioShock movie. And this has happened countless other times with stuff too. And so I like the way things are revealed. I like even, dude, stuff like this. I know it's disappointing for Sony, but getting this little nugget from a voice actor about a potential release month is fun. This kind of level of speculation. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to, compare on how it's going to be and how that will fit in with everyone else's games and stuff like that. I much prefer the secrecy. Obviously, there are limits to this when things can get annoying and can cause some shaky confidence when you're too secretive. But I vastly would prefer this than knowing everything about what everyone is doing all of the time.
And then James Gormley wrote into us and said, hey, boys, with the rumors of Spider-Man 2 set to launch in September and the other rumor of the PS5 Slim on the horizon, is it a no-brainer for Sony to launch the PS5 Slim this fall with the Spider-Man 2 bundle? What do you think of that, Chris? The idea of the new PS5 model coming with Spider-Man 2 as an option. I think that's a great idea, and you might be right on, James, for all I know.
Yeah, I mean, it would be smart, and it wouldn't be out of character. It would make a ton of sense. It would be a good way to push units. If they're really trying to compel people to upgrade in any real meaningful way, the best way to do it would be with a bundle, and the best bundle that I could imagine would be Spider-Man, the one that, I still can't, but like how many did the original? It was like 20 million, something like that.
I think they combined Miles and Spider-Man at some point. It's like close to 40 million at this point.
That's nuts. So like, yeah, it's a no-brainer if you're trying to push hardware, especially for people who either don't have a PS5 already, or for people who just like are, into new stuff and they just want a new bit of kit. No-brainer. You bundle it with Spider-Man 2 with the PS5 Slim.
All right. Well, we'll see more about Spider-Man 2, hopefully sooner rather than later. No confirmation, no denials yet either. Sony used to at least deny things, but maybe no one's even asking anymore. I don't know. But September, count on it. Number 2, late in 2022 at the Game Awards, Sony and its fully owned studio Guerrilla had an announcement. Burning Shores, an expansion for Horizon Forbidden West, the second core Horizon game that was released on both PS4 and PS5 back in February of 2022. With a Californian setting that seems to bring Aloy to Los Angeles and its surrounding environs, we've heard nothing else about Burning Shores in the months since, at least until right now. So here's the deal. According to the official PlayStation blog, Burning Shores will be available on April 19th. It's only coming to PlayStation 5, so no PS4 version, and it will cost $20 or your local equivalent. Pre-orders on PSN are available now, though as usual, you shouldn't pre-order games. However, should you choose to, you'll get a special outfit and bow for Aloy. As for Burning Shores itself, the DLC, quote, sees the fierce Nora Hunter pursue a sinister threat in the untamed wilds of far future volcanic Los Angeles, which has been racked by violent tectonic activity, end quote. Importantly, quote, the story picks up Aloy's story right after Horizon Forbidden West left off, so to enter the Burning Shores, you must complete the main quest. Following the events of the ending, she will receive a call over her focus, beginning the DLC, end quote. More information is apparently forthcoming. Horizon, which began on PS4 in early 2017 when Zero Dawn came to PlayStation 4, is one of Sony's biggest modern hits and perhaps its most surprising. A third-person action RPG set in a post-apocalyptic United States, the series is led by Guerrilla, the Dutch team once known best for its FPS franchise Killzone, which ran during the PS2, PS3, and PS4 eras. Horizon has since expanded beyond Guerrilla, with fellow first-party team Firesprite releasing Call of the Mountain as a PSVR 2 exclusive several weeks ago. And although officially unannounced, more Horizon games are incoming, some rumored, others obvious, including a third core game, a PS5 re-release of Zero Dawn, an MMORPG, a multiplayer game, and even a Netflix show. Though it's been a while since the numbers have been updated, it's fair to say that Horizon and its sequel currently sit at perhaps 40 million copies sold, combined across PS4, PS5, and PC. Vincent Castro wrote in and said, hey, Sacagawea symbols. It sounds, I don't know, that sounds like it's a little racist, but I don't know why. What's the deal with Horizon Burning Shores? They only released a pre-order trailer less than a month out from launch, but with no new footage. Colin, are you excited about this DLC? Because it sure seems like Sony isn't, based on the lack of marketing around it. Thanks as always. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not very interested in it, to be honest. I thought Forbidden West was great. but it's a little late, and we're going to talk about that in our next inquiry from another audience member. But does this pique your interest at all? Did either of you even beat Horizon?
I did.
You did. Okay, yeah. So
yeah,
are you going to play this?
No, I think I'm good, unless for some reason that it comes out and people say this is the most amazing piece of Horizon content yet. Then maybe I would check it out. But Colin, the main thing for me with this, and I was trying to look up the percentages. Like, is there a way that you can check the trophy percentages that aren't on PSN profiles, like just the general amount? Because I was wondering, this seems very interesting that they would make it a requirement that you have to beat the game. Because I would imagine, particularly with this being a bundle-in game as well, that the amount of people that finish this game, the percent is very low. And so they know that they are marketing this to a much smaller audience. I guess that in theory, if you market it and tell people, hey, this is awesome, we're doing this great thing, come check it out. But by the way, you got to finish the main game. People have time to go and finish it. But I feel like the fact that that's a requirement is going to severely limit the amount of people that check this out. Because I know there'd be people, at least with the last DLC, and maybe I'm mistaken about this, but with the last DLC in the last game, it was just kind of an optional quest that you could do at a certain point within the game. Not that you needed to have it totally finished. But it just seems like an odd choice. I understand probably from a story perspective, that's what they wanted to do with it. But it seems from their perspective, like they're severely limiting it.
Yeah, if you go to PSN profiles, you can, if you log in and just mess with it, you can see it. I have it showing the PSN numbers because I'm logged in, so I see that naturally. The Horizon Forbidden West on PS5, so that will be the only option for you, was beaten by 29.3% of the people who played it.
Oh, that's actually more than I would expect.
It's more than half of people on PSN profiles. But yeah, the general PSN audience is 29.3%. And it's interesting, if you go back to the original PS4 Horizon, Frozen Wilds, so the most common trophy is 17.4%, which is pretty high adoption. But if you cut that into a third, which is what that would be, so in other words, what you're saying is that you would get it would be more like Fallout 3, where you would get the mission at a certain time and be able to go, as opposed to having to beat in the game, then you would assume that that's 3 times more accessible maybe at baseline than something where you'd have to beat the game, where only a third of the people have beaten the game. And so you're subtracting, so it would go from 17.4 to like 6%, if that makes sense, if what I'm saying makes sense. So it's just going to be a small group of people that play it. As far as, well, I want to get this next question here and then we can continue the conversation. Lorenzo von Matterhorn wrote in and said, hey boys, what is the optimal time for a game to release DLC or expansion content? More often than not, I find that I'm usually well done and dusted with a game and find it difficult to pick it up again, even with my favorite games. Returnal's DLC, I'm just getting into it on PC. I've never played Horizon Zero Dawn, and as for the second best game of last year's Forbidden West Burning Shores, I doubt I'll play that one either. Even my favorite game, Witcher 3's DLC, took me 5 years to get around to. I think the only time I'm eagerly awaited and played DLC on release is Left Behind. So what is the window that you're willing to go back and dive into DLC or expansion content in the game? Thanks for all the DLC you guys put out. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Appreciate you, Lorenzo. So that's a big problem for me too. I think it's just too late. I never played the Frozen Wilds on Zero Dawn because it was too late, and I want to play it, but knowing, or just, I mean, it's rumored, but obviously I think going to happen that Zero Dawn is going to come to PS5. They will certainly put all of that into the same package, and I'll just play it there. So I think that'll be cool, but I don't know. What do you think about this, Chris? Is it just too late? It's going to be about a year. Actually, it'll be about 14 months between the game's release and when this DLC comes out. And since you've had to have beaten it, you are asking quite a bit of people to remember and be into the mode and operation of playing.
Yeah, I feel like they would have been better off just making this a standalone if they were going to do it at all. To which my answer probably would have been just save whatever it is you're planning on doing for the third game. I don't think Horizon is necessarily a game that benefits from DLC. I feel that way. I feel that way about a lot of games, to be honest. I feel that way about, there's no real reason for The Last of Us Part 2 to have DLC, in my opinion. I think it's like fine, or I don't know, something like Red Dead or something. Like, these are all like really large, really, self-contained games that last you quite a while, and when you're done with them, I think it's okay to be done with them. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to put a lot of effort into content that a fraction of your audience is even going to be able to experience, especially in the context of an additive thing. I don't know. I think I'm with you guys in the sense that I feel like it's a bit just too late for something like this. It'll probably be good, but I don't know. But we're also not really DLC people here, are we? At the same time,
No,
I feel like we've talked a lot about how like we're all kind of like not really those people, and so maybe there is a huge. I mean, no doubt there's a huge audience for this, but I can definitely say for me, like I have no intention of going downloading this again. Especially for DLC content that I would have had to finish the story to maintain.
Yeah, I think just for me, and we can go to you, Dustin, is I like the idea of games coming out, and I know this is like challenging for people because they're like, why wouldn't it be in the core game? But if you just deal with the economics of game development and try to create something where you have a full-fledged game with DLC quickly available, if not available immediately, which the so-called day one DLC is, I don't mind that. Because I feel like it gives people an option to say, like, do you want more right now? Like, you're feeling it right now. Do you want more, as opposed to letting people go? I know that there's got to be some sort of financial reality of hooking certain people back in, getting those new sale products of the core game, which you're going to obviously need to get this, I would imagine. I mean, obviously it wouldn't make sense otherwise and it wouldn't work. So there's got to be some sort of economic reality that we don't know, where they make X amount of money by drawing more people in, and people go back and they spend the money, and people that already own the game, this many people translate that into sales, and so on and so forth. But I just feel like it's I wish we didn't castigate fucking day one DLC as badly as we did as this like fundamentally bad thing, when I feel like that could have been a kind of cool thing that would have given us something like Burning Shores quickly. And then maybe people would have argued, why wasn't this in the main game? But I think when you're given a 50-hour open world RPG or whatever, you can say, like, I mean, isn't this big enough? Hard to communicate probably, but in other words, I think it's between a rock and a hard place, but it's just way too late for me. I doubt I'm going to play this.
Yeah. I feel like for me, and I'm guessing this is the same for you guys, I'm most interested in standalone DLC, something that doesn't require me to pick it back up into an old save and necessarily remember how to play the entire game, which I know that ironically, this is how all From Software DLC works, is that it is not standalone, and it usually throws you into the deep end. And that's fine, because I think it works for what they're trying to do. But in general, I think of the DLC that I've really enjoyed is stuff like the BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea DLC.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that DLC. I know a lot of people love the Witcher Blood and Wine DLC, which I believe you can also just buy and play. Maybe just on PC, but you can at least start a new game of just that DLC.
Yeah, exactly.
Left Behind is another one that I think it's separate. You can kind of take it or leave it. You don't need to remember how, like, get as good as you were when you beat the game in order to play it. But and Dishonored 2 had an excellent standalone.
Oh yeah, Death of the Outsider.
Death of the Outsider was fucking awesome. Good. A whole new set of powers, nice bite-sized campaign as well.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be my preference.
Yeah, I actually kind of... Yeah, I just... Because even DLCs that I really, really do want to play, I find that if they are connected to the main game in that way, like I just don't end up playing. There's a whole Control DLC that links it to Alan Wake that apparently is like really, really good, but I don't have that save anymore because it's just gone. I don't know what happened to it. I can't get it back. And so I'd have to finish Control again just to play it. And I don't know. Like I love Control. I think it's great, but I don't necessarily want to play it again just so I can experience this. I would have much rather preferred this just be this standalone thing, or at the very least, connect it to the main game, but don't require me to finish it again. Like, if I finish especially like, what if I switch platforms or something, and like, oh, I played on Xbox and now I'm a PlayStation guy, and this DLC comes out, and it's like, all right, well, I don't want to have to go through the whole game again. I remember the game. I like it. I've put the time in. I don't know. I just think personally, those are better. It's a better way of doing DLC for me, and I guess for the type of players that we are. But also, I think just review wise. I just feel like they just tend to be better in my experience. Like Blood and Wine is like one of the most highest esteemed DLCs ever.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So for me, I do think in some sense, first of all, I hear all of that. And I think that's true, but I just wish we would embrace more of games as platforms, even in the single player open world sense, so that a game like Horizon could conceivably just be built upon, just add more and more geography and more quests and more thickness to it. Thick, a little more thickness and texture to it. I wish we could embrace that. That would be so fun, in my opinion. Almost Division. I know this is going to drive people nuts, but like the divisioning of Horizon, I think would actually be fairly interesting because the gameplay is so good. Horizon is fucking great. People don't say that nearly enough, in my estimation. Horizon Forbidden West and Zero Dawn, but Horizon Forbidden West is a phenomenal game. Phenomenal. Love it.
I think certainly gameplay wise, like I think Horizon. The problem that I have with Horizon is that it gets it in its own way a lot. Like, because I think the gameplay there is really, really awesome, and I actually do think I think a multiplayer type experience in that world would actually work really, really well, because I think it highlights the gameplay. And I think every time I wasn't having fun with Horizon, it was because I wasn't in the gameplay. It was something extraneous, or like I was in a side quest that I didn't really care about, or I was, just all these extra things. But that gameplay is really solid. And so I think a lot of people would jump into anything that played that way.
I mean, imagine a 4-player. I mean, we're going to get some sort of multiplayer Horizon game, there's no doubt. But yeah, 4 players taking down one of these big machines together. Sorry, we had an interruption there, technical interruption. But what I was saying was, just the idea of a 4-player or more or less, I don't know, 2 players taking down a machine, coordinating almost like cavemen taking down, a large megafauna of some sort would be super cool. I think Horizon does lend itself to that. I do think the gameplay is just so fun. No doubt about it. And I got to say, Call of the Mountain, when you get a chance to actually fire your arrows at something moving, actually does the combat pretty good too. It's just everything else it's not central to the game at all, at least in my experience. I haven't beaten it yet. I'd like to get there and just kind of get through and get it over with, so I don't have this half played game. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out for Burning Shores, and maybe we'll play it when it comes out. I have no fucking idea, but it comes out on March 19th. The day before 420, bros. Whoa.
Ooh.
Number 3. In news that has some players annoyed, sometimes controversial publisher Electronic Arts has announced the discontinuation, sunsetting, and ultimately the delisting of a trio of Battlefield games from its developer DICE. Indeed, the damage originally went beyond Battlefield and also affected another DICE game, Mirror's Edge, though that part of the news was quickly recanted after being announced. So here's the deal, according to a post on EA.com. Battlefield 1943 launched on PlayStation 3 in 2009, and Battlefield Bad Company and Bad Company 2, launched on PS3 in 2008 and 2010 respectively, will soon be removed from the PlayStation Store for purchase, and thereafter will have their multiplayer functionality turned off entirely. Beginning on April 28th, these 3 games will be removed from the PSN, and on December 8th, at the end of this year, the online servers for these games will be turned off forever. This, of course, means that the multiplayer-only Battlefield 1943 will no longer function in any capacity, though EA notes that both Bad Company and Bad Company 2's single-player campaigns will still work after this date. DICE writes in part, quote, "While these titles hold a special place in our heart, we're now looking forward to creating new memories alongside you as we shift our focus towards our current and future Battlefield experiences," end quote. While this is no doubt an aggravating decision for a small group of people, the reality is that this move makes sense for EA, and it's actually remarkable any of these games are being supported in the last 10 years, nonetheless to this day. And remember, if EA leaves games available for purchase that don't function fully, they have to deal with all that comes along with that, the refund requests, the support tickets, and more. And Battlefield has of course long since moved on, with all games after Bad Company 2 still supported, beginning with 2011's Battlefield 3. The most recent release in the series is the dubious and tortured Battlefield 2042, which launched on PS4 and PS5 in 2022, and future plans for the franchise are unclear. As DICE's primary franchise, it almost certainly will continue. As for that Mirror's Edge news, however, fear not. The 2008 first-person action platformer will remain available on PS3, as will its 2016 sequel Catalyst, available on PlayStation 4. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about this. Dustin, I want to go to you first. Are people really mad that they're going to shut down Battlefield, the bad company, on PS3? I really couldn't even believe that hasn't happened already. Dude, Battlefield Bad Company came out in 2008. Who amongst you is still playing Battlefield Bad Company? I mean, I really got to know it. On your PS3. I feel like this is an example of people getting mad for just because it confirms their worst expectations. As if this snaps out of existence the millions of physical copies of Bad Company and Bad Company 2 that exist. And as if it snaps into existence the possibility of playing the online only 1943 after it's run its course. I think people have to. I just think everyone needs to calm down a little bit. I think the Mirror's Edge news was a little bit more egregious, and I think EA pulled the plug on that quickly because they realized they couldn't possibly justify it. So, and that's different. But they remedied that, so it's hard for me to be too mad. What do you think?
So I think the biggest problem is that both Bad Company and Bad Company 2 have single player campaigns. And I understand that you mentioned about the fact that if people buy it and they're expecting multiplayer and it doesn't show up, that's an issue. I think that's dumb. I think that's a bad excuse. I think what you do is that you keep these games listed, and maybe even in the title, in the description, and then if somehow, maybe this is part of the problem, is that PlayStation couldn't figure out how to do this on their old ass PlayStation 3 PSN, is that you get a warning that says you are buying this game, the multiplayer no longer functions. This is a single player only experience, and let people, if knowing that, decide if they want to buy the game that is no longer has all the options that it used to have. And thank God we have physical copies, Colin. This is the thing for me about, you shouldn't be rooting for a digital only future. Sincerely, I don't care for anyone that only wants digital games. That's great. I love that you love that aspect of it. But for the sake of game preservation, and there should be physical copies available. I don't care if no one buys it. Maybe they're online only. The fact that, or online only to purchase, and you have to get them shipped. Maybe they don't have them in stores anymore. But I do think it is important that these physical versions continue to exist and continue to get made. And that's just one reason. There's many other reasons as well. It's the fact that the US internet isn't necessarily up to par. And I see the responses like, oh, well, Call of Duty only is just an unlock key for a download. It's like, yes, that is the case for Call of Duty. That is not the case for every game, though. Far from it. So it is important that we have physical games. Whether you choose to buy them or not, that's up to you. I think that it's important for people to have options. And I think that, too, them delisting this game that has a totally valid single player mode sucks. I don't expect them to keep multiplayer servers open forever. Yeah. Certainly not. That doesn't make sense. Particularly, I mean, Battlefield 1943 is sad for me because I think that game fucking rules.
Yeah, that game is cold classic, dude. No doubt.
It is really, really great.
Yeah,
but it's also nobody's playing that anymore anyway.
Right.
Like, if you're doing matchmaking on 1943, you're absolutely running into the same people every single match. You know, like that is maybe one dedicated lobby of like maybe 50 people max playing that game.
My question, I probably should have done more research. Maybe you know from doing the write-up, Colin, is that, are these games being delisted on PC also?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So
if that's the case,
that's a non-issue.
Well, let me look though. That might not be true.
If that's true, then it's a non-issue in my opinion.
Yeah.
No. I think I'm wrong. Hold on. No, digital storefronts. All digital storefronts.
Oh, so all digital.
Okay, that fucking sucks.
Yeah, that sucks.
Because people should be able to buy this game and run it. I don't know.
1943 was never on PC. But yeah, for Bad Company and Bad Company 2, they were going to come. Yeah.
That's pretty unfortunate because Bad Company 2 is awesome. Like, not just from a multiplayer perspective, but like that single player is actually really good too. And, you know, and maybe this is not something that developers or publishers more specifically want to encourage, but usually when a lot of multiplayer servers are taken offline, dedicated fans will find a way to get that working. I remember specifically when Halo 2 went offline in, I think, April of 2011 or 2012, one of those years. People like stayed on for a while before they were forced off, and then eventually they figured out, we could run it through, I think it's called Xbox Connect or something. Not the Connect camera, but it was like this client that allowed you to kind of like fake servers. and people kept it alive through that. And I think that's perfectly valid, to be honest. Like, I think you should still be able to, even if that's like a really small contingent of players, like Dustin said, there's still a valid single player component there. Let them buy it. And if the online servers don't work, that's fine. Dedicated people who are buying this game at this point in time are going to find a way to make that work in some way. Like, there are ways to play Quake still, like, you're fine. So yeah, I'm kind of with Dustin, where I do feel like this is, it just sucks to see games just vanish like this. Even if there are physical copies out there, thank God. I do, like, I'm not personally like somebody who likes managing physical copies, like packing boxes full of, cases and discs and finding a place to put them all and getting up and changing the disc every time I want to play a different game. That's not the personal style that I prefer to play my games in, but we do need physical copies. And this is kind of why.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a component. I'm trying to remember. It's been so many years since I've played Bad Company. Do those games have licensed music in it, which might be part of the delisting, is that they just don't want to renew that?
I think Bad Company 1 does.
But I feel like there's some memory of blowing shit up and there's some kind of
I think
song going on.
I think Bad Company 1 might have the song, Bad Company. Now I think maybe.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong on that.
But what's funny about that is that could just be patched, because that's always going to be on the physical version unpatched. You can't even do anything about it,
Right.
So it's I wrote this down just so I didn't forget it. My conspiracy theory, I have two of them. Number one, I think that they expected that these problems were going to be solved by the closure of PlayStation Network and other things like the erosion, because it's really not just PlayStation Network. It's obviously going to affect Xbox Live and probably most keenly PC for at least the Bad Company games. So there's this idea that maybe the whole Sony store closure, which never happened, was going to solve this problem, and it would be moot for us to talk about anyway, because none of these games would be available. But the other thing is that I could imagine that it's either planned or certainly they're looking at the feedback and planning it now, which is to say, we'll just re-release these games. What we'll do is we'll sever the campaigns from the multiplayer sections, put the campaigns together into a Bad Company package, up-res it, make it run at 60 frames, and sell it to you. and you're going to buy it. And that's the funniest part, So
Bad Company is a fan favorite.
Yeah. I wrote the strategy guide for
Battlefield. Battlefield needs that fan favorite win right now. If they announced a Bad Company 3 along with remasters of Bad Company 1 and 2 with multiplayer, that would be pretty damn interesting. And
finally get an
cool.
FOV slider in a Bad Company 1 that desperately needs it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Bad Company's awesome. I love Bad Company 2 in particular. I loved Bad Company 2. Like, everything about the way that game, how that game felt, how that game looked, just awesome.
Yeah, it's fun.
Like, easily one of my favorite.
Yeah, those are good games.
Battlefields.
Yeah, I remember writing the strategy guide for those, and I wouldn't be surprised if they brought those back. There's like a place for looser World War II and other war style combat games. Remember Gearbox was going to make that game. They were going to re-release that World War II.
Yeah. Oh my God, what the hell was it?
Yeah,
Freedom. No.
I'm going to look it up here. People are probably screaming at their screens right now. Brothers in Arms. And they were going to release a new Brothers in Arms game, and they announced it. Hell, what was it? Yeah, there was like, it was awesome. The trailer was awesome. I remember it was like them in a bar. I don't know if you guys recall this, and they were like fighting all the Nazis and shit.
I was looking forward to it. I was excited about it.
Yeah, me too. And so there's like a place for some more offbeat style subcategory war stories that are not just mainline Battlefield, mainline Call of Duty, and all the rest. So maybe we would see that. Linton Singerayer wrote into us and said, "Hey, big boys, my question was about double standards towards the treatment of platform holders within the gaming media. Nintendo is currently slated to close the 3DS and Wii U eShops in the coming days, permanently stranding hundreds of games forever, a nightmare to those of us who care about video game preservation. However, the reaction to this compared to, say, Sony a couple of years ago when they planned to and ultimately changed course over the issue of closing the Vita and PS3 stores is night and day. I remember a chorus of disgruntlement towards Sony as being anti-consumer, which I probably agreed with to an extent. However, these same people don't seem to have the same furor around Nintendo. What do you think? Is Nintendo not held to the higher standard than the other media platform holders? If so, Why do you think that is? And perhaps blind nostalgia for those in the media and in our community. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay frosty. Hope to see you in the UK sometime soon. Thank you, Linton, for writing. And I see you nodding along, Dustin. Do you agree with this here? I saw that this is happening imminently. I saw that one creator bought every single game, which is kind of cool. And then
that's a cool video.
And then is sending it to the game preservation people, which I think is a really nice idea. And wink and nod, I'm sure they'll be able to get all that stuff off and put it somewhere, which is good. And I would imagine, I mean, I can tell you that I don't have access to it. I don't want access to it. But I've discussed it before that if you mod your Vita, you can get access to a Vita store mirror that's literally a mirror of the actual Vita store with all the games for free. So I imagine that this from a preservation level is probably not as serious as people think, because I imagine every one of these games can be emulated at some point, but it still is weird and a shame. But I don't blame it. The thing is I personally don't blame Nintendo for that. It's like, why would you want to keep this shit open? Especially these games that are stranded, like there's no way to carry them over on accounts and stuff like that. You're buying them in vacuums. Why would you want to continue to let your consumer do that? I have no problem with it.
I think it sucks. I think that they should. This is one of those situations where I'm like, figure it out. They already removed the ability to purchase. Like you can't purchase directly on a Nintendo 3DS or a Wii U. You have to go and either get a gift card or you need to add money via your Switch, I believe. To me, I'm like, that's okay. So you removed that element from the equation of you don't have to do the credit card processes on the device. That's a big element, the security, whatever. So now, to me, I'm of the opinion it's like a lot of people, how do I say this the right way? I think it sucks that Nintendo is being rewarded for shutting down these stores by everyone going and buying the things they want last minute. And so they're probably going to get a big boost of sales. And then a lot of these games are just going to be forgotten about unless you go and hack your devices and then download them. What do you expect people to do? Right? If like, I don't know. This was obviously a big thing that we talked about when we were talking about the PS3 and the Vita stores, where it's like, where it's more of a moral question. Sure, I understand the argument that Nintendo has the right to decide what is for sale and what isn't, but we're getting into a really weird territory when we're talking about games where we treat these as if they are like a work of art in a lot of ways. And I understand it's not like one-to-one parity with movies. There are some movies that get lost to time as well. I also think that sucks. But to me, I feel like, in particular, the 3DS is still pretty, I don't want to say vibrant, but there are still a lot of people that are using that platform. The 3DS lived alongside the Switch for a decent amount of time. The Wii U, I can understand more so them wanting to take that off the map, but it really sucks too from a perspective of when the Wii U store goes down. If you want to play, let's say Zelda Twilight Princess, the HD remaster of that, good luck getting a copy, because they're well over $100 right now because of the way that the quote unquote retro market right now, which I understand Wii U's not retro, but we'll include that in that since it's not current gen and it has collector status.
Well, Wii U's got a small enough catalog where people feel like they can get every game. So that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So it really sucks. I don't know. This is, again, like I said, I can see the other side to this argument that it's like you're not owed the access to these games all the time. And I understand that, but it's not going to make me say it doesn't suck, because it does.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. I just think it's like, I don't think this is going to be a problem beginning with Switch, beginning with PS4. It's not a problem with Xbox at all, and it's not a problem with PC at all. But I think we're finally in a place where this is going to be the last time you got to deal with this. PS4 is always going to exist, in my opinion. I don't feel like they're ever going to shut that off. It's not going to exist as a console or hardware that's supported, but you're going to be able to glean all those games from new hardware forever. And I think Switch is the beginning of that for Nintendo. And Microsoft has done a lot more work, both on a hardware and software level, to make that happen with their old games at a necessity, I think. And I think that's a really great thing that they've done. So I do think it's unfortunate, but I look at it as the last time as well. I
hope you're right.
I just don't know how they would probably justify it going forward. Everything's got to be backwards compatible at this point. So there's just no, and I think that they've built their networks with that in mind, the pay structures, the names, the account names, all that. I think it's all built now with the future in mind. It's like you were bringing up music and Bad Company. It's a good example. The reason that the Wonder Years is so fucked up in streaming formats, the classic sitcom, is because it's got so much music in it that they've had to kind of butcher it. They didn't know. In other words, they didn't know any better when they were making these decisions. It was such a time where they were like, what are you talking about? You're going to get it on video? You're going to buy a whole season on DVD? Like, they were like, what are you talking about? We make syndication deals. We make syndication deals, dummy. And then they went and smoked their big cigars. But they didn't foresee what it can now be foreseen. So now Nintendo and Sony are not in that position anymore. Now they know. And they're not going to make their networks these tangled webs that can't be undone. So I think it sucks, but I just don't think it's going to happen anymore. It's like PS3, Vita, they're going to shut those off. I feel like at some point, like they're definitely going to do it. And I feel like that would this generation's kind of the end of that.
I think that I would argue that you brought up they were making decisions that they had no idea would be a problem in the future. And I think that it is absolutely possible that exact same thing is happening right now. And I think too, from an architecture standpoint, they've kind of settled into this PC like architecture. But who's to say that at some point we're going to be moving on to a new way of computing, like we had, like from PS3 to PS4, right? That was a change, but at some point, I think that they will have to change things, and thus backwards compatibility won't necessarily be possible in order to progress further. I think that it's not, in my opinion, I would not expect technology to always stay within this architecture and to go up in a linear fashion. We'll see things change, and maybe hopefully the silver lining way of thinking about this is that they'll figure out ways that this new type of computing or new architectures will be able to emulate or figure out a way to play this old stuff. But I've already seen conversations around the fact that it's possible the next Switch won't be backwards compatible with the Switch if they want to be able to evolve past the NVIDIA architecture that they have in there. So
the question is, will they be able to emulate the Switch? Right. Like they can emulate all their other hardware, and they already do. That's why I think the PS3 is just a huge problem. It just can't be emulated the same way. And we actually went into that in the recent episode of Sacred Symbols Plus about why that is. We reminded everyone that it's simply that you have to go game by game and make them work because they all use the cell processor differently. But I appreciate your fear, and I think you're probably right, but I think it's depressing that the salvation of this constantly evolving medium that gets more and more technologically advanced is optical media and memory cards full of data. And to me, it's just, I just think that's so weird. It's like, what the fuck is that? That can't be, what I refuse. That's why I'm just all digital. I'm like, no way, man. It's so, there are these little things that happen that are disappointing, but I think by and large, it just kind of, I personally see it as part of the territory that these things can go away, and that I really only look at 2013 and beyond and beyond on PS4 anyway, on PlayStation 4 as like the permanent era of PlayStation. I will be truly shocked and dismayed and upset and annoyed and yelling from the rooftops if PS4 on PS6 is not readable, but that's not going to happen. And hopefully by that point, they will have figured out what to do with PS3. And if Tom from Moore's Law is Dead says to me, like, they've had individual PS3 games running natively on PS4 since the PS4 era, but they just don't quite know what to do with them. And it's a lot of work to get them going. So that's a bigger problem to me than all this other stuff. Chris, do you have anything you want to add before we move on?
No, I mean, I think you guys kind of covered pretty much everything that I would have brought to the table. Honestly, that was like a lot more in depth than I even thought it was going to go.
Fair enough. All right. Number 4, final piece of news. Do you remember the Metal Gear Solid game Ground Zeroes? Officially titled Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, the title came to both PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 in 2014 and acted as a prelude to the long in development and seemingly tortured Metal Gear Solid 5, which finally emerged on both PS3 and PS4 in 2015. Anyway, it was a very short and somewhat controversial release, one that takes place in the 70s, 10 years before the events of Phantom Pain, and around the same time, the 2010 PSP turned PS3 game Peace Walker. Anywho, if this game was perhaps better received critically and commercially, it may have turned into something else, says auteur and Metal Gear creator Hideo Kojima. On Twitter, as relayed by website Video Games Chronicle, quote, Ground Zeroes was originally planned as a prologue to Metal Gear Solid 5, an important introduction to Root Snake's vengeance in the main story, and the theme of Metal Gear Solid 5 is retribution. Since PS4 was launched at the end of 2013, the game was pre-released with the PS4 Fox engine and open world to introduce the new Metal Gear Solid and also to provide feedback with the main game in mind, end quote. And so he continued, quote, the development of a full game takes 4 to 5 years and times change during production. So I thought of offering an episodic format like a streamed drama where one episode is produced and distributed. Ground Zeroes was meant to be an experiment. Nevertheless, after the launch, many people seemed to expect Ground Zeroes to be a full game and did not get my intention. It was felt to be too early, end quote. But perhaps it could be too late, depending on your point of view. After all, Telltale had been doing episodic games to great acclaim for several years by that point, and others like Don't Nod were beginning to get into the idea too. The bigger issue was that after waiting for so many years, people wanted the next big game, which they would get in 2015. And indeed, aside from the highly dubious Metal Gear Survive, launched on PS4 in 2018, we haven't seen anything from Metal Gear since Ground Zeroes and Phantom Pain came out in 14 and 15. Rumors have long swirled about both a remake of the original 1998 Metal Gear Solid game, which would technically be its second remake as it was already remade in the early aughts on GameCube, as well as a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3, which came to PlayStation 2 in 2004. MGS3 is considered a good point to begin remaking the games, as it is the earliest title in the core timeline, and can begin retelling of Snake's story sequentially instead of irregularly. The original Metal Gear, launched on MSX in Japan in 1987 and later in the West, takes place in the mid-90s, while the first Metal Gear Solid game takes place in 2005. All right, so Chris, I'm curious what you think about this. They were maybe going to do an episodic Metal Gear sub-series that was halted because no one understood this. The biggest thing I got from writing this up was I totally forgot that not Ground Zeroes, but that Phantom Pain was on PS3, which is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting indeed. I forgot about that. But what do you make of this, the possibility that we could have gotten a more episodic approach? I just don't know that people are into it as much as...
I'm really glad that didn't happen. I don't like that. I don't know, man. I don't think episodic structures work in this way. I think we already have an episodic structure. It's called From Game to Game. Like that's your episodic structure. It doesn't need to be even more granular and more arbitrarily splintered. I think, and there are some games that I think do episodic structure within a singular piece of content. I think of Alan Wake or actually because that's kind of in chapters, I think, if I recall correctly. But even more new than that was Quantum Break with Remedy, which wasn't didn't set the world on fire or anything. But that game ended in episodes. That's how basically that was how the checkpoint system sort of worked. It was you got to the end of an act or whatever, and then it would end and it would play a credit sequence. And it was meant to mimic a TV show, but you still could continue immediately from then on. And I thought that was kind of neat. It was it's not that episodic structure is bad inherently. It's the way that we've seen it delivered in the medium of games specifically, and more often, that has been kind of the problem. I don't like the Telltale style at all. I don't like, here's one episode and then in a few months you'll get the second one. And then in 2 years you'll have a season. It's no, it doesn't work that way. It's very presumptuous that people would want to come back again and again after really, really inconsistent breaks. Sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's they
always seem to be trying to buy themselves time. Because they were always had their asses lit on fire when they were making these games.
I mean, that makes sense because episodic content isn't suited to game design. It's not. Video games are really, really complicated structures. You can't just, it's not South Park where you can turn around an episode in a week. You need a lot of time. You need testing. You need bug fixes. You need all sorts of things that go into it that could add weeks to months to years onto your development timeline. And the promise of episodic content isn't that there's going to be more content. The promise is that there's more content consistently and expectedly and regularly. And that's just something that you can't really do with full-on games. I think it's why live service has had such a difficult time kind of finding its footing. I think Bungie does an exceptional job at this. but they spent a lot of years failing before they figured it out. And, you know, like, that's not, I don't know. I'm glad we didn't get an episodic Metal Gear Solid game series. Like, I'm actually over the moon at what we got instead. Knowing what we could have gotten instead is it puts Ground Zeroes and Phantom Pain in a very, very different light. Although I really loved Phantom Pain regardless.
It also goes in and really highlights the idea that it really is up to the market. Like you said, like the audience didn't get it, but that's kind of your problem, you know, because we are the audience. So Dustin, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think that the biggest problem with Ground Zeroes is that they released it for $40, I believe, and the main story takes 2 hours to beat. That's the headline right there. New Metal Gear game takes 2 hours. That's like an IGN headline. And of course, I just checked right now. If you do everything, there's 20 hours worth of content. But this is not how you kick off an episodic format, is with a high price to gameplay ratio like this. It's just off-putting. In fact, a lot of people were like, what the fuck is this? You sold me a demo to Metal Gear Solid 5 for $40. So I can understand why people didn't understand what they were trying to do. I don't know. I feel like I'm not trying to be a contrarian this episode, but I will say, I think that episodic formats could have worked in certain specific scenarios. But like Chris was saying, the biggest problem were companies like Telltale that had no consistency and very little communication, where sometimes you get the first few episodes and a nice cadence of when you would expect, and then you hear silence. You don't know when it's coming. And then eventually you find out it is coming, but it's going to be longer away than you would expect. And that really pissed people off.
Dude, they fell apart during the last season of The Walking Dead. They didn't even deliver all of it. They had to come in and get rescued. Sorry to interrupt, but just to underline that.
Yeah. And I think that is a totally justified reason to feel like you hate episodic games, because so many people fucked up in the way they were doing it. I always felt that, in particular, a game that could have worked in the episodic format, but failed because of the other episodic games around it, was Hitman. I thought that was super cool, because Hitman in particular, if you're just playing through each mission in that game one time and then moving on, that's fine. That's a way to play it. I would argue, in my opinion, that you are not doing it service, which, again, I know on this show we talk about people playing games however they want, but Hitman is a game that is designed around replete playthroughs and doing missions over and finding new and creative ways. And so in that style of game, when they were doing it episodic, I thought it was kind of cool that you could really dive in and chew on one mission in particular and figure out all these neat ways, and then really kind of maximize your gameplay style for that mission. And then a few months later, you get another mission that is basically like a small open world where you can dive in and figure out a million new ways for this new mission. And it kind of was like a perfect drip feed. Whereas with Hitman 2 and 3, you have all of this before you. And for me, I know that there were times where I felt like, man, I want to spend more time on this mission, but I also feel compelled to move on. And so I think that episodic format actually lended well to that gameplay style. And I think that Telltale games would have done well also in kind of creating this almost water cooler conversation around these games, but they just simply were not consistent enough. And so I understand why this format was killed. And I would say overall, good riddance, because I don't think that most companies would be able to handle it, like Chris was saying. But with that said, there was some merit.
Yeah, I think Chris is also right in the sense that the greatest episodic games are just games. So like Mass Effect, those are 3 episodes. It's just that they're huge games, so that you can justify them by themselves. You know what I think? Where I think episodic games could earnestly and really shine is on Game Pass, because if you can really get your shit going and really predictable, high quality, hitting your marks, that would be a reason for people to stay subscribed. And that could be an interesting way to deliver some of your products and kind of utilize the same reason why Hulu and others drip feed their stuff, so that you don't just subscribe and then unsubscribe. While others like Netflix have really painted themselves into a corner, because that's their whole thing is like, we don't do that. So it's like, well, you can never do that. So I think that there's some interesting new possibilities, but I do think the market has generally responded negatively to this kind of thing, which is why I think everyone's so averse to it. And I think watching Telltale melt down during a season of a game was very off-putting to a lot of people, and they're very lucky that it was for an IP that people respected and wanted to come and save for the sake of the IP. Because if it was like something proprietary, it just never would have been finished. And I think that kind of sucks too, to do that to people. Okay. Let's move on to listener inquiries. We end every episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, with 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience over on patreon.com/laststandmedia. I publish a thread in the newsfeed each week. It usually goes up Wednesdays. On Thursdays, I delete it. So you have that 24 hours to enter your stuff. And I go through it, comb through it carefully. Brian Lau wrote in and said, hey guys, Ubisoft announced their version of ChatGPT called Ghostwriter, which will help them create dialogue for NPCs. I remember you guys discussing this in the past where we could see games provide gamers with hundreds of meaningless fetch quests to boost the completion time. Do you expect their future games to be even more bloated? Or do you think this will be used more wisely on their live service games like the upcoming Division Heartland or Assassin's Creed Infinity games? Dustin, I'm curious to hear, did you see the controversy surrounding this? So this kind of was announced ham-fistedly before GDC, and then now the week we're recording this is Games Developer Conference in San Francisco. It used to be one of my favorite shows to go to, actually. I feel like I'd probably be assassinated if I went to GDC now.
Oh,
but back in the day, I used to really love going to GDC, and so apparently they went into more detail and actually gave some talks about it or whatever. So what it sounds like is that this Ghostwriter technology that Ubisoft has created, as Brian noted, will help writers and creatives, designers at Ubisoft to create what are specifically called, as I understand, barks. And it's kind of like dynamic writing. So it's not saying like when you get a quest, the AI is going to write the quest for you. That's not what it says. What it says is that there could be a person in a field in Far Cry, and you can kind of use Ghostwriter to just have it write dynamic scripts for it. Or lines, so you don't have to worry about it. Some people have taken this as a big affront. I say gird your loins, because this is just the beginning.
Yeah. I feel a bit mixed about it, but in some ways I think it could be cool because, like you said, Colin, a lot of people see this and think, oh, Ubisoft is going to get out of writing their games or writing dialogue. And it's like, that maybe could be true. Maybe that's a way they would use it. But I think that you're right in that the most compelling case would be a dynamic AI that is able to talk and respond in a way that makes sense to your character's actions. That when you talk about an open-ended game, we've talked about Mass Effect these past few weeks and how it can only kind of boil down to so many ways. There can only be so many ways that they can program into a game for a character to react to what you're saying. But the idea of an AI being able to analyze all the players' actions and respond in a very specific way, that's kind of intriguing to me. That's actually sounds pretty dang cool if it's implemented correctly, especially if you're able to use an AI voice that sounds convincing in order to make it say out loud the things that the AI is writing.
What if it's only the AI voice from TikTok, those TikTok videos, like went to the mall, like that?
Yeah.
What if it was only that voice that you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's also wasn't there a Rocket Raccoon voice that people were using? Like they kind of got wild with those TikTok voices.
To me, I think it's like that's the least of their problems at this point. To me, I agree with what you're saying, which is that in non-incidental contact, let's say, between character and NPC, could the NPC say a shit ton of different things to just make it fresh? And when you actually engage with the NPC in a meaningful way, then the written content comes in there. That to me, I saw some writers complaining about it, but I'm like, you really like writing this trash? Don't you want to focus on meaningful quest dialogue and story-driven beats and all that? Or you want to sit here and write character barks that it's raining or something like that? To me, I was a little surprised. I guess maybe that's for the lower rung writers, but it seems to make perfect sense to me.
Well, and I think it's important to point out too that anyone using one of these tools, you're not just generating it and then putting it in the game. All of these AI, you need to go in, and usually the first thing it spits out isn't necessarily what you use. It gives you something, and then you can either refine it from there,
It's a
or
template.
you can
Right.
give the AI more specific instructions to get what you want. So, and I think I'm looking at a Polygon article all about this, and I'm trying to see who this interview was with. But I'll just say that this quote real quick about it was, Ghostwriter isn't replacing the video game writer, but instead alleviating one of the video game writer's most laborious tasks, writing barks. Ghostwriter effectively generates first drafts of barks, phrases or sounds made by NPCs during a triggered event, which gives script writers more time to polish the narrative elsewhere.
Right, exactly. That makes perfect sense to me.
I'm trying to figure out who said that.
Who wants to write that? Who wants to write that shit? I would never want to. What do you think about this, Chris?
I mean, it's AI, so I feel like it's scary technology. It's very new. It's very disconcerting, but it's also, I mean, like any new technology, there's going to be wise ways to use it, and there's going to be unwise ways to use it. And inevitably, this, we are barreling towards a future where we are, where things are very, very uncertain, especially with this, where it's like, right now it's barks, but undoubtedly in the future, it'll be full script, like undoubtedly. Like we are headed to that point. And I think that's what people are afraid of. But that's not now, and in the meantime, I do think AI is like, I speak with a lot of animators who like, they're animating and they're amazing artists and they're doing great jobs. But, I've been in the room with these people while they're doing the work and I've heard people say like, man, it'd be cool to have an AI to do this in between that I don't care to do because it's it's the grunt work that is ultimately kind of being thrown into the laps of robots. Now that will eventually become more complicated and that'll be a huge cause for concern later on. And I sympathize with that fear. Like that's really deeply concerning, but it's also inevitable. And so while we're at a stage where we can use these tools to kind of assist creative people, assist people who are good at what they do in such a way that it allows them to focus on what they love to do and in turn, hopefully make better things. I think we should embrace that before we get lost in the kind of, I don't know, the concerning like nihilism about like where this eventually leads. Like, make no mistake, it's going to be scary, but right now it's relatively tame. So let's get as much positivity out of this period while we can is kind of how I feel about it. And, I'm sure, I mean, I don't know. I think AI is a tool like anything. It could be used very, very irresponsibly and very, very dangerously, or it could be used very wisely and very restrained and very intelligently. And we'll see where it goes, I guess. I would imagine, though, before I go on, I would imagine that this is something that legislation is going to catch up to very quickly. Like I would bet money that in the very near future, there are going to be AI protection acts or something that, almost forbid not necessarily the development of AI into becoming more advanced, but almost as a way to just protect the workforce, which is going to be like a wild time to live through. I can't believe this is happening so soon. It's crazy.
Well, the pictures of Trump getting arrested are so good.
Dude, I thought one of them was real for sure.
They're amazing. The one of him
real?
running away from the cops is fucking. I actually started like cackling when I saw that one. But there's one of him like getting dragged out by the cops. I'm like, this looks dead up real, like straight up.
It was very convincing.
Right. There's almost. Remember we were just talking a couple years ago on the show when we would fuck around with those engines and the faces would never be right. Like the more you stared at the face, there was no face. And we were saying like how that's the big thing they have to get over is like that's done. I mean, that's done. And like they figured that out. So it's happening very rapidly. I wanted to share this with you guys though. I thought that you'd find this interesting. Someone wrote in, and I put this on Discord actually, so some people have already seen it, but someone wrote in, and I'm sorry I don't know your name because I cut you out, so I wouldn't put you on blast. Not that you would have cared or whatever, but it said, I asked ChatGPT what video game character Colin Moriarty from Last Stand Media is most similar to, and this is what it said. So this came from ChatGPT. Trevor Phillips from Grand Theft Auto 5. Like Colin, Trevor is known for his sharp wit and irreverent sense of humor. He also has a tendency to say things that are controversial, much like Colin's reputation for provocative statements. Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2. Handsome Jack is a charismatic villain who enjoys mocking his enemies. Colin has been known to challenge the status quo, which may be reminiscent of Handsome Jack's tendencies. Joel from The Last of Us. While Joel is not a comedic character like Colin, he is known for his gruff personality and his willingness to do whatever it takes to survive in a harsh world. Colin has also demonstrated a certain toughness and resilience in the face of criticism and controversy, which could make Joel a suitable comparison. Here's the problem I have with this. I appreciate that. That's really funny. And thank you for sending that in. But here's what's fucked up about it. You can teach an AI math, and there's a linear way to get the answer, and it's always the same. And the way you get it is always the same. Language doesn't work at that level apart from the most basic dynamics of sentence structure. So what I mean by that is the fox jumps over the fence. That's horrible writing. It's also literal English. And anything beyond that would have to be fed by an actual person or writing that is stylistic and different from another person's writing. And the three of us would explain that the fox was leaping over the fence in different ways, right? And that in and of itself is what is being scraped. And that's what I have a problem with, because they're stealing from us. And it's different than math. And this to me is the big differentiator. The art engines know what to do because they're stealing from artists. They don't know what to do because it's natural. There's no naturalistic law to art.
Yeah.
And so this thing is learning about how to write based on other people's writing, including the writers at Ubisoft, no doubt, which are the source probably of Ghostwriter's entire AI. And that to me is somewhat fucked. I don't think it's avoidable, but it's fucked. Right. Because somewhere deep in that in that Ghostwriter is like each writer.
Yeah, and a kernel of like every single person who's ever written anything.
Right.
That it's combing through. Yeah.
Right. While a chess AI will always know how to beat you in chess. In fact, the chess AI will linearly and mathematically beat everyone in chess every time at this point. The chess engines are so sophisticated that you can't beat them. So that's clinical. That's just simple outwitting. But this is a different thing. This is art. And I have a problem with it.
Yeah, I have a problem with it more when it comes to art than with writing, though, to be honest with you. Because or language. Because are we not just our mannerisms and languages not just kind of a cobbled together infusion of everything we've kind of experienced, or every person that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like the way that we speak is not necessarily inherited through like, you know, blood or anything. It's inherited through experience with other people.
Well, I think
you
right.
could argue.
I'm sorry.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say. Well, let me just get this in, because I think, I'll kick it back to you. Is that I think it's the way we speak is as true as 2 + 2 is 4.
Right.
But I don't know that they're materially the same. Right. In other words, like, you're absolutely right. It's a product of everything. Like I would speak Japanese in a Japanese accent if I had just grown up there. There's nothing about me that made me speak this way. You're right. Yeah.
These are the conversations that we're going to keep having until things get scary, by the way. This is intro to dystopia 101. And you know, it's coming.
I don't know if I believe this argument, so I'm just putting it out there, but there is an argument about AI that all of human knowledge and how we have learned to do things is from referencing people that have done it before us. All artists reference other artists, and often, and there's like that line about like good artists steal or whatever, copy, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Great artists steal. I think it's
great artists steal.
Picasso.
So that's part of the argument with these AIs. Like, well, maybe they are creating things in somewhat the same way that we have as humans by just cross-referencing what has already been created. So it's an interesting thing to think about.
It's an uncomfortable thing to wrestle with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think part of being an artist, and I don't really consider myself an artist. I'm a writer, which is an art, I guess. But one of the understated parts of being an artist is knowing what art is good and replicating that art. That's where movements come from. So there is, I guess, a natural tendency to copy, right? Like 100%. All surrealism kind of looks like Dali and other things. Like you can trace it all to that, right? And so maybe there's part of it where, so the machines are going to copy us too. You might be right.
We talked last week about the taxonomy about how you can kind of bridge everything together to one singular. Obviously, Pong is that, or even earlier. What was it? Space War.
I think would be like like Space War would be some weird Space War in the start, like the first video game with a monitor, like a GP, like a graphical interface was Pong. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and that leads to I want to do something like that, and then that's Galaga, it's Pac-Man, and then later on Doom, and then Doom turns into Bioshock, and Bioshock turns into whatever the hell. Bioshock turns into Prey. It's a crazy. I don't know. It's a. Oh, this is too deep of a discussion to have on a PlayStation podcast. It's getting on anxiety.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and it is happening very fast. And I already don't believe things I see now. So we're definitely in the thick of it. All right. Matthew Miller wrote in and said, Colin has stated in the past, seemingly proudly, how few 10 out of 10 scores he gave while reviewing at IGN. Only one. I can't help but notice the cavalcade of perfect scores the site has given in the last 2 weeks alone. Succession, Resident Evil 4, Dead Cells Castlevania DLC, Attack on Titan, John Wick 4. What gives? Are we in a golden age of nerd shit? Are entertainment standards falling? Or is this just necessary for site traffic? I don't know that it's got anything to do with site traffic per se. And I'll also suggest that things that are reviewable trend to be better. So when people see like, the average review score is a 6.8 or whatever for all games reviewed, it doesn't mean that that's the average game quality. It means that that's the average quality of a game that is reviewed. And those are two very different things. So when you see 10s being rattled off, Succession, Succession got a 10, but what about the 1,000 other TV shows that just had episodes that were launched or seasons that didn't get any scores at all? So I want to balance that out, that I don't think it has anything to do with site traffic, and that's just based on my own experience there. But are standards falling? Standards are falling journalistically, and I think standards are falling in terms of, I don't think we're in a golden age of creation at all, personally. I think things are really, really good, but I'm not like I feel like we're at an inertial stage right now where things are just going. I think things are being run into the ground. I think things are getting boring and stale. I think the streaming services are calling up a lot of Achilles heels in the way we expect to consume content and the way we have long relationships with it, letting things breathe, things getting canceled immediately because there's an episode of Barry. I don't think this is a spoiler, but there's a funny episode of Barry where they interact with a streaming service and they release a show on the streaming service and it's immediately canceled, like the day it was released, because they're like the algorithm just doesn't like it. That's like that was their whole thing. It was hysterical. And so I think 10s, if anything, I think it's a result of like maybe some of the wrong kinds. And I don't want to say this about IGN per se. I don't know who wrote this stuff, but some of the wrong kinds of people writing about things. I think you have a lot of enthusiasts writing about things. I think that that's always been true, but only enthusiasts give out 10s like that. I played a lot of banger classic games and I only gave one of them out. And I didn't even really want to give it out to that one either. I was nervous too. This is very comfortable. That's as many 10s as basically happened in the entire time I was there. So, Dustin, what do you think? What's going on here with all these 10s? Are we being inundated with perfect scores that are meaningless?
Yeah. Well, I think it's first important to point out to Matthew, he is slightly incorrect in that in IGN's review score, a 10 out of 10 does not mean perfect. And I think that is the truth. It means masterpiece, which I think is worth pointing out because there is no perfect piece of media out there. None. There's nothing that is fully perfect. And also it is subjective. So nothing is perfect to everybody. But I think it is worth saying that I would say a watering down of what masterpiece means. And I think there is something to be said about this enthusiast aspect, because maybe with something like Attack on Titan, that Attack on Titan fans believe, or whoever wrote this, who we would say is a big Attack on Titan fan, believes that this is a masterpiece for fans of this show. But does that make it a masterpiece for, or I just said not everybody, but for, we'll say, the general public? Probably not. So that is something definitely worth considering. So I've always felt that the review scale has been off for years. In fact, I've said that people, when reviewing, use that scale like it's a grading for a test at school, in that a 7 is a C well, no, maybe not even that, because I feel like no one wants to use anything below a 7, because honestly, 7 is considered bad to a lot of gamers out there, that it's like, oh, if it's a 7, that means it's bad. It's like, that shouldn't be the case. We should explore this scale more, but we've kind of locked in to this. We have a 10-point scale, but it's more like 5, maybe, right? And that only the most heinous of heinous get anything below a 5.
And it's
like,
technically 100 points, which is even stupider. I mean, I was so mad about that when I was at IGN, like that we were going back and forth between. I'm like, it's so dumb. What is the difference between a 7.7 and a 7.8? I don't even know. You know, like, no fucking idea. I hate scores. I hate them. I hate them.
I was trying to think, just for me, like, what's the recent, if we're using the term masterpiece, right? For me, that's probably going to be Elden Ring. That is the last masterpiece game for me. But again, that doesn't apply to Colin, and that's okay.
But I think that I do. Yeah, but see, I don't like that either, because being a masterpiece is like not about. It's certainly subjective, but it's culturally accepted. There are a lot of dumb fucks out there, including me, that don't know anything about fine art. And we understand that the Mona Lisa is a classic, you know, like a masterpiece of art. And you can look at it and be like, I look at it sometimes, even when you see it, it's a fucking ubiquitous piece of art. And I'm like, what is so good about this thing? But you kind of just understand it's a place, it's a time, it's a person, it's a movement, and you don't understand it. So just defer to the people that do. And I feel like in games, I have that feeling where it's like, I appreciate everyone's different opinions on things, but BioShock's a 10, whether or not you like it. And so is The Last of Us, you know? And I feel like that there has to be some sort of objective force behind it, because otherwise you could say, for those that like Prototype's a 10. So, well, what the fuck does that mean? You know, it doesn't make any sense. So that's my opinion. I don't know if that resonates with you.
Yeah, I think that makes it. It's so tough. I mean, we are dealing with subjective opinions, and I will say, just to reiterate, I think that it's definitely the 10, particularly IGN, has become watered down. I particularly with movies and TV. I'm like, man, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of the last what I would consider masterpiece. True Detective season 1.
Oh yeah, that was awesome. And that's like 10 years ago, isn't it?
Considered a 10. Yeah, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
Mad Men. Yeah, season 1 of True Detective, maybe like parts of Ozark or something. But even then, I would probably give those things like 8s and 9s most of the time. Yeah. The one thing I will say, and Chris, we'll go over to you if you have anything to say about this, is that I stand by my 10. I don't know how many people that are giving these things out stand by the scores that they've given. And I think it's a fine illustration of why scores are so dumb. You know, because people they don't obsess over the content, they obsess over the number.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a complicated, because I'm some part of my brain likes seeing numbers. Some part of it likes me being able to look up, like, what do people think of Dead Space? Oh, 9? Oh, it's probably pretty good. And it is somewhat useful at a glance. It is. I will obviously say that it's not as informative, but it is useful in some way. And I don't know. Do I feel like people give out 10s too much now? Probably. I would imagine. Whether or not Resident Evil 4 is or isn't, I could believe that.
Yeah, I believe it.
I could absolutely believe that that's like a masterpiece level, because it was already kind of that as it was.
Definitely.
So like I could imagine that, like, oh, it's the same masterpiece but better. Yeah, I could see that being like an 11 probably. But as far as like whether or not we give them out too much, I do agree that we need to have some standard, and we probably shouldn't be doling them out constantly. But I also feel like because video games are so individually unique, even among themselves, in comparison to film and television, which like obviously vary. Like obviously SpongeBob is not Breaking Bad, but I would argue the difference between something like Tactics Ogre and Elden Ring is infinitely more vast as far as what those things are fundamentally at their core. Not even just as experience, but as interactions with the medium. And so I don't know. I don't know how you can get as much of a consensus, because all paintings are paintings. And they might be paintings of different things, and even more complex ones, like maybe some I've seen like 3D art installations that are really, really cool. But I just feel like it's such a vast medium that getting a generalized consensus at all is kind of amazing. Like the fact that we have games like Resident Evil 4 that everybody kind of understands is like, oh, that's a big deal. And I didn't really like it when I was a kid. I was never really that big into Resident Evil when I was younger. I like it a lot more now. But the fact that exists at all is staggering to me, because it's all so different. There are people in my family who like their favorite game of all time is like Miss Pac-Man. And I totally get it. But I don't know. Like, is Shadow of the Colossus a 10 out of 10? I think Shadow of the Colossus is like easily it's a masterpiece for me. But I also don't know what the last 10 out of 10 I would have given something would be. As far as television, like, I don't know, Breaking Bad probably is the last thing I would consider. Games probably. I don't even know if Elden Ring might be like a 9.5 to me, if I was to give it anything. Dead Space is close. I thought Dead Space was phenomenal. But like, is it a 10? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. That's the thing is like, I guess it's a little bit of like bravado, I suppose, but just being around it so long, I think I just trust my gut. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I felt that way when we gave a 10 to Skyward Sword at IGN, and I was like, I like Rich George. I wasn't going to argue about it, and I didn't know the game, but I was like, there's just no, I watched you play it. I'm like, there's no way. Like, but so that's, I think a lot of it is just maybe your own feel. And one of the great advantages of being a gamer of my age and even older, let's say Dagan's age, my brother, especially, is he's absorbed games at the time that they've been released for so long, since basically the very beginning, that's an unreplicable experience. And his gut instinct, as long as he stays current, will always have more gravity than anyone's in my life, because he has seen the most in real time. And we're already to a point now where if you're born now or you're 10 years old now or whatever, you're never going to catch up. Never. You're going to have to pick and choose what you know, and you're going to have to rely on other people to tell you what's what. And the last 10 that came out, The Last of Us Part 2. Thank you for writing in. Fernando Diaz wrote in, said, "Hey, Sacred Lads. A question came up recently on another podcast, which in my humble opinion wasn't adequately addressed. I thought I would write in and pick your brains on this topic. Is Tears of the Kingdom a AAA game? This is not a question of quality, of course, and I have no doubts that it will be excellent nonetheless. Nevertheless," he says, "when one considers the production value of first-party Sony titles like Forbidden West and God of War, surely the yardstick for what qualifies as AAA has shifted, or is it not that simple?" Dustin.
Yes. Next question. It's just, I don't understand. Like, yes, this is a AAA game with a AAA budget with AAA marketing. Because it doesn't run it at 4K on a PS5 doesn't change that.
I'm surprised of your dismissiveness a little bit, because you're the advocate of the stinky Switch, and you're saying that there's no difference between The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom or whatever running at 30 frames at 900p and Horizon Forbidden West running at 60 frames 4K.
I'm not saying there's no difference. I'm saying that they're both considered AAA games made for their specific intended hardware.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't find it this straightforward. I think it's a more interesting question than maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's more interesting because I think about it this way. I brought up Peace Walker earlier, right? Peace Walker was a very high quality, if not one of the most high quality PSP games. It is a joke compared to what was going on console at that time. And I don't consider Peace Walker a AAA game because it was doing what it was doing for its hardware, but wasn't doing what it was necessary on console. So it's more somewhere in the middle. That's why I think I find it a little more interesting than you're letting on. I'm a little surprised. Yeah.
I'm going by what I believe you've laid out as your definition of what a AAA game is.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just saying that I think that there might be more. It's like the quadruple A or argument, or we just need to get, since we never talk about double A games, maybe we should. Maybe because it's really triple A, indie, right? I mean, that's kind of the paradigm. I don't know. What do you think about this, Chris?
I don't know. I think when I think of double A games, I think of things like Destroy All Humans or something like that. And I love those games, by the way. I love double A. Like that's arguably where I've had the most fun, the most pure fun in my like War of the Monsters on PS2, like all these ridiculous games. But even let's say like the Destroy All Humans 2 like remake or whatever that runs at like 4K, 60, all that. You compare that to, I don't know, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Switch running at whatever native resolution, whatever native frame rate that runs at. The Legend of Zelda is clearly a AAA game in comparison. And it's not even necessarily that's like a qualitative statement on either one. But I mean, it's just clear like what a AAA game isn't necessarily about. It's not really about specific fidelity. It's not necessarily about specific like these random qualifications. What all it matters is it's a AAA game from a first party studio or like a big studio or like, you know, anything of the sort. And I think, I don't know, I want to peel at this in a way that's a little bit more interesting, but I also don't really know where to go with it. Because I am sort of with Dustin where I do think it's a little bit more straightforward where like, yeah, it's a AAA game.
I think manifestly it probably is as well. In fact, it's going to be a very high quality game. It's probably going to be 10 or close to it for a lot of people. I have no doubt about that, but I can't. So I agree with you guys like 2/3 of the way, but I can't go all the way because I think time and expectations change. So as an example,
right?
This is an obscure example, but here's an example. Mega Man 6 is the last NES Mega Man game. It's beautiful and it's awesome. It came out in 1994. It was actually published by Nintendo. Capcom didn't even publish it in the West. And that came out 3 years after the SNES came out. It looks pretty much identical to Mega Man 2 and 3. It's the same engine. It looks pretty much the same. It's a little more complicated. Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3 were AAA games for their time. But you can't judge Mega Man 6 by Mega Man 2 and 3's era, but because by the time Mega Man 6 came out, SNES was out, completely beautiful games like Donkey Kong Country were right around the corner. Super Metroid was already out. The Link to the Past was already out. You know, it's like, I don't think that Mega Man 6 is AAA at that point, right? And so that to me, that's kind of where so I look at that 2017 Zelda release and I'm like, that's more manifestly AAA than I think it is today. If you want to judge it by its hardware, then that's fine to me. But then that really calls into question, aren't all these random ass DS games and GBA games AAA too? It's like, to me, I don't think we ever looked at them like that.
Well, so is AAA just a matter of timing? Is that what you're kind of getting?
Well,
because I think is Uncharted 2 AAA still?
I think it was AAA. I think, yeah, probably. I don't know that it would be AAA. We probably look at that as like more of an A or AA game because we can't even see it in its natural like modern beauty. I don't know. You know, I don't know.
Right, but I feel like that. I don't know.
But that's a good point. That's a good point.
I feel like it muddles the purpose of what those terms are, which is it's not to say it's not about a qualitative or that's the wrong word. It's not a AA game that came out in 2004 or something, or even earlier, like say like 2001, a AA game. You could look at in a modern lens as like an indie game, technically, if you're going just by like, you know, pure, you know, visual. Or like the style of it, or like the complexity of it, or even I mean, arguably, dude, like even just the size of these teams. When Bungie was making, you know, Combat Evolved, which is obviously Combat Evolved is a AAA game, obviously, but that was like what, like maybe 40 people maximum working on that game, and that's like a small studio now. So like, I don't think that makes I don't think that makes Combat Evolved like a AA game in retrospect. I think all that matters about like what is AAA and what is AA and what is indie, I think it's almost entirely to do with when they come out, and that just sort of stays because it doesn't undo what it was at the time. And it might be qualitatively differently. Like when we look back on it, it's like, oh, it's like a little bit, it's a little bit cuter. It's a little bit more clever. It's like, oh, look at how small things used to be, but that's still AAA. And that's kind of how I feel about it. Like I would argue like, yeah, like Donkey Kong Country, AAA. Easily. It's not modern AAA, which is I guess like a distinction, but it's still what it is, and it's still, you know, what it was at the time. Just because audiences grow and feelings change over time doesn't change the objective reality of what the game was at the time and how it came to be and the purpose of it at the time. And that's just kind of how I view it. But.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. I think more complex than I think I even thought. Thank you for writing in. Donald John Vaders wrote in and said, my dudes, this one is mostly for Dustin, but I'm sure the rest of you will have something to say about this. How about those Resident Evil 4 anime shorts? Is this not the most adorable and hilarious ad campaign for a video game you've seen in recent memory? I think this is just another sign that Capcom is firing on all cylinders. Very stoked for RE4 Remake, and I know you all are too. Cheers, guys. Keep up the hard work. Appreciate you each and every week. Thank you. Flagrant use of the exclamation point, Donald, in this.
Yeah.
I used to get made fun of for that at IGN by my editor. It really made me afraid of using them. Dustin, have you seen these anime shorts? I've seen them circulating, but I have not watched them because I don't want to see anything. So,
well, you'd be safe to watch to see this. Totally, they're totally cute and they're not about the actual story of Resident Evil 4.
It's like tangential, right?
Yeah,
like
they're
like
just
nonsense.
They're like 2 minutes long. I think not even actually. I think that most of that is there's a little intro that plays, but these are awesome. They're hilarious. They're super cute. I love the just how you have this game that is so dark with gore and violence, and then you have these cute little anime shorts. I love this. This is the type of marketing that I super appreciate, where you're not necessarily taking yourself so seriously all the time. I can't stand that. That's annoying. I love to see these kind of just making a little joke out of things. And so I love these. I think there are 3 small episodes out now, and I don't know how many they're doing, but I absolutely love this. I'll be watching all of them. Now you've got me thinking about it all the time. You're in my head, Colin.
Good. That's exactly where I want to be. Chris, have you seen them?
I have not seen them. I understand the nature of them, and I understand that they're likely not spoiler heavy. It's just, you know, it reminds me a lot of there were the Halo Wars ads where like it was like the 2 commanders, and then like one of them had like a used car dealership, and they were like, it was like a strategy. It was like they were strategically trying to like one up each other or like rip the other one off. I imagine it's something similar where it's just kind of nonsense, but at the same time, every time I've seen anything about Resident Evil 4, I've just my eyes have glazed and I've just like gone past it because I just don't want to see anything. And I didn't want to see anything to the point where I didn't even know that these were even happening until today, until this question. I'm just on complete media blackout. I mean, I'll watch them if they're really just that completely disconnected, but I'm just so stoked to play this.
Me too.
And it's so close now that I'm just like, I don't know.
I promise you it'll be okay.
Yeah.
They're not even situations that happen in the game for this. It will hype you up more, honestly.
Cool.
Michael Elodie wrote in and said, hey, Sacred Shrew, with all of the talk about accessibility features, what's the deal with single player games that don't let you pause cutscenes? As a fresh dad, I occasionally need to pause any game to help with the baby, but the damned Hogwarts Legacy game will let me pause any cutscene, not the fully directed ones, and not even those dialogues where you can literally skip forward. I fully understand this decision in live games that need to always be online, but I feel this is such a weird and quite frankly idiotic omission for such a basic user-friendly feature. We have accessibility features for the blind, the deaf, the emo, and the Moroccan, but little Jimmy, who was asked by his parents to stop playing and take out the trash, can't pause a video game cutscene in 2023. Michael getting a little racist there, huh? Unintentionally, probably. There's nothing wrong with being Moroccan, of course. This is weird. I am annoyed by this. And it brings up a problem I have in Octopath Traveler, which is you cannot pause it either. That you can go to the menu, but the clock keeps running. Why are you doing this? Being in the menu in a role-playing game doesn't mean you're pausing the game. It means you're in the menus. So when I want to pause the game, that's different.
Yeah.
Why don't they understand this shit? And I agree with you. These little things are so annoying. You have to let people pause the game. It's absurd.
It's crazy that that's even a problem. Like that we would have been like, oh man, you remember pause buttons? Do you remember when they worked?
It's just silly to me that it's like Resident Evil 4. You'll no doubt, I assume, be able to pause the game. But when you're in the menus, it's real time. That's part of the game. Those are two different things. So why wouldn't you translate that to all games? This is a frustrating thing to me too, Dustin. Do you ever find frustrations with this?
Absolutely. This was the case in Metroid Prime Remastered, where you could not pause the cutscene. And I can't stand this. Now, I will say there is a greater offense that thankfully has pretty much been eliminated. But last year when I was playing a bunch of old PS1 games, where it not only does not pause, but if you hit the start button, it will skip the cutscene. Totally unacceptable. And this is something that happened to me a few times when I was playing some of these old games that you'd hit start and then it'd be like, fuck. And then you have to look. Thankfully, we can look it up on YouTube. But I remember when I was a kid and playing a game, accidentally hitting a button during a cutscene and then it just skips it.
Mm-hmm.
What are you supposed to do? Can't look it up on YouTube back then. So thankfully, we've gotten away from that. But yeah, we need a pause. And I agree, Colin, that it is annoying to me. I'm not as anal as you are about the clock, but if I can keep it consistent to some degree, I do appreciate that. So I think that if the menus are not necessarily part of gameplay, like you were mentioning with Resident Evil, pause the clock. Or at the very least, I've found that some games, if you go to the PlayStation home menu, it will pause the clock as well. That's a kind of a nice middle ground there if you're trying to keep it consistent.
All right. Final inquiry comes from James Arnold, who says, "Good day, sacred gentlemen. After listening to Colin speak on his loss of focus due to technology, it got me thinking. I too relate to being too easily distracted by my phone while trying to play games, watch movies, etc. The last time I was able to focus on a game 100% was Kingdom Hearts 3, as I made sure my phone was off and out of the room until I finished. After that long of a wait for that game, any distractions or spoilers would have made me go postal. What sorts of habits, if any, do you guys do in order to make sure you are able to focus on the games you are trying to give 100% of your attention to? Thanks for all the insightful podcasts over the years, boys." Honestly, I never try to get immersed in games. It's just that the very best games get me immersed. So when I was playing Dead Space Remake, I was completely immersed in it and into it. But when I'm playing like other games, I'm not very immersed in them at all, either naturally or because they're just not as good as that. So I don't actually go out of my way, and I'm very easily distracted. The reality is that most games don't get my undivided attention. I assume Resident Evil 4 will at least mostly get my undivided attention. I think I'll try to really make that happen by wearing a headset too, so that I can just hear it and just be in it and not have to worry about anything else. But I don't do any other specific preparatory things. No, do you, Chris?
No, I've accepted that if I have to force myself to be immersed in something, it won't work. I can't pretend to be interested in something. It's not possible. So something has to really grab me, and I'm really bad about this. Like a lot of games will not grab, even some games that are by all accounts amazing and like get received very, very well, will just not grab me. There will be something off. There will be something that puts me off. Dead Space was the last one that really, really, really got me, and I think a lot of that is just due to how immersive Dead Space as a default is. Like there's no video gamey HUD there. Like every element is where it is, and Shadow of the Colossus is kind of very similar. That's why I love going back to it. But no, I don't have any rituals. I just accept, like, listen, if this isn't grabbing me, it's probably not going to. That's okay. I'll see how far I can get. I'll see how far I can get into it. As far as like, is it fun to play but not immersive? Then yeah, maybe I'll stick around for longer. If it's not, if that immersion is like a big part of it, then chances are I'm not going to get that far into it. I'm really guilty of not finishing like a lot of games that I start, because it's just like you got to grab me. If within 30 minutes I am not having a great time and also like really immerse in something, it's a rough sell, personally.
Dustin, thoughts?
Yeah, one thing for me sometimes is if I feel like I'm immersed in something, but my phone keeps buzzing, I can put on the do not disturb mode, which is an awesome feature. I believe Android has a similar feature, but for iPhone, it's nice in that it will stop giving you notifications and you can be very granular and allow certain notifications through. Or you can have a situation where certain people, if they need your attention, they can break through the do not disturbs to avoid like if an emergency happens or something. Like I'm pretty sure for iPhone, if someone is on my favorites list and I have do not disturb on, they can choose to notify me anyway, which is kind of a nice little feature if it's necessary. But so that's kind of something I do in particular if I'm playing a game and it's just like a lot of messages come in. I need to really dial in on my phone what notifications I get and what I don't. There are things that I'm getting notified for that I don't need. It's an unnecessary capture of my attention. For example, I think a lot of Discord notifications come through to my phone, and I just don't need to be notified anytime someone tags me. Like I just don't need to do that, but I've never turned it off. So that's probably a good strategy, but that's just getting into healthy phone habits, which I'm sure that all of us could be better about doing.
Oh, certainly.
But yeah, you use those features. They're good features. I'm preaching to myself right now that I need to set that up better so you don't constantly need to feel like you're needed at all times. Like it's okay, just unplug for a little bit. If people need you, they can figure out ways to get to you and reach you.
My phone's always on do not disturb. So just literally at 100% of the time. 20. That's why sometimes I don't see texts or don't get to them for a while, because it depends on if I'm on my phone or not. If I'm not on my phone, I'm not going to see it. All right, my friends, that's it for this episode of Sacred Symbols of PlayStation Podcast. It is time to go. Chris, closing comments.
No closing comments, man. I'm fiending. I'm so excited.
Well, you can play on Xbox right now if you want to set your time to New Zealand. So,
I might.
Dustin Furman, closing comments.
I am also fiending, of course. Very excited for a big release. Gotta say, real quick, is that Lego Drive game?
Oh yeah, I forgot to put that in the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Looks pretty dang cool. I was surprised that I was liking what I was seeing. I think that it's been described as like a more open world Mario Kart type experience. I watched Ryan McCaffrey's preview and it was very good. It was a nice 5 minutes, cool, this looks interesting. So check that out if you're interested. And yeah, excited for you guys to see the live show this weekend. Check it out.
Right. That's right. We appreciate your support. Over on patreon.com/laststandmedia, early ad-free access, the ability to submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas, Sacred Symbols Plus, Defining Duke, Ultimate, early access to those shows as well, and Constellation, and so much more. We couldn't do without you. Thank you for that. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.